Okay, good evening and welcome to the March 6th subcommittee meeting for the TTA negotiating with teachers and ESP meeting. Welcome. If we could all rise for the salute to the flag.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you. Just a quick, start to the meetings. This is our March 6, 2023 subcommittee, 2024 subcommittee meeting, which will be televised and recorded, maybe viewed live on Comcast Channel 22 and Verizon Channel 34, or on youtube.com/Tewksbury TV. Under the open meeting law, the public is permitted to make an audio or video recording of an open session at this time. I would ask, is anybody recording tonight's meeting besides our telemedia? Okay, thank you. So we can carry on, and I'll turn this over to our council and to the TTA. Hey.
Hello.
Hello, that's not Ted Lewis.
So, I
you?
thought I'd introduce her. So Ted just got a promotion. I know, I'm happy for them. We're gonna miss him. We had a fun year together. A fun path around the sun, as they say.
Yeah.
But this is Dina Flino. She's
Hi,
our new
Tina.
MT representative.
I'm
she's
sorry, I
looking forward to
didn't
working with you all.
Welcome. Tina?
Dina. Yeah.
Tina.
Hi, Dina. How are you?
Good to see you.
You too. What we would like to do to get started, if you don't mind, is to show you or share with you an updated, amended summary of the financial analyses we passed out at the last meetings. So let's get that circulated. And while we're doing that, oh, yeah, I was going to say, I have some for the folks over here. And then our tables, if you want to pass, you guys don't have a paper copy. While we're circulating these documents, we'd like to pick up where we left off on responding to some commentary by Mr. Lewis about town finances. And I'm going to ask Mr. Montori to give those remarks. And if those of you who are new to the process, Mr. Montori is the town manager for Tewksbury. He's been in that role longer than he chaired it.
13 years.
13 years. This is short.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. First of all, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to give an overview of how we developed the town budget, specifically the town revenues. What I want to go over today is just give some historical information regarding our stabilization fund, free cash, just a quick benchmark of the town as well against other communities, a couple of other communities. Look at some historical annual town meeting general fund budgets that were for both town and school. Look at local receipts, which was part of our discussion at the last meeting, specifically on how we project our local receipts, and then some challenges that we'll be facing as a community move forward. Before I jump into the first slide, I think it's important to note that when we develop the budget for the town of Tewksbury, we develop it based on reoccurring revenues. And what I mean by that is we use three main revenue sources to develop the budget and develop the revenues to sustain the budget. That's property taxes, which are the major source of revenue for the town. We're restricted in how much we can raise in our property taxes because of Proposition 2.5. We can increase each year by the previous year's levy limit plus new growth, which is any new developments or new value that was added to the community. But we're restricted each year to stay within the Proposition 2.5 levy limit. And that's very difficult to do in a community. And whether it's sustainable is going to be challenged over the next few years. The other major area of our revenue is state aid. That's aid we receive from the Commonwealth, Chapter 70, which is education aid, unrestricted aid, which is just general state aid that we receive, reimbursements for charter schools, veterans benefit reimbursements, things like that. So that's the next largest source of revenue that we receive to help pay for the budget. And then the final one is our local receipts. Again, this was discussed last week on how the town projects its local receipts, and we'll go into that a little further. But those are the three areas that we receive revenue year in and year out, and that's what we develop our budget with. So this first slide gives you a history of our stabilization fund. Now, the stabilization fund is a fund that's set up and is designed to accumulate each year, and is a fund that we set aside money in to be used for one-time expenditures, capital items, which we've done in the past, as well as it's there for unforeseen emergencies or any type of crisis we may have. And as you can see, we've built this reserve up over the last 10 years. The last 2 years, putting significant money into the fund. And the main source of funding the stabilization fund has been our free cash, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it's important to note that the stabilization fund, over the past few years, we take out a little bit over $2 million a year on average over the last 13 years, and it's funded both town and school projects. In the upcoming May town meeting, we will be utilizing, of this $18 million we have in the stabilization fund, we plan to utilize $5.8 million for school projects and a little over $1.6 million or $1.2 million for town projects. So this $18 million by the end of town meeting in May will be down to $11 million. So that's a good example of how fast we can reduce this fund for needed one-time expenditures in the town.
Mr. Montori, can I ask a question about the source of funding for
Sure.
stabilization? So free cash is one source, one way to fund. Is there other ways that the town, it just isn't using, like, can you, I don't know, Prop 2.5 hit or something like that?
So in the past, when we've had additional revenue from, say, state aid or new growth, at October town meeting, we would just raise and appropriate through the property tax levy into the stabilization fund, but that's rare because we're usually right up against our 2.5 levy limit. Mostly it comes from free cash. If there's any other source of surplus funding, it would go in there. But for us, it's mainly come from free cash. But you could take it from other reserves if you have reserves that you want to transfer.
Okay, thanks.
So that bar on the very end, after, if these town meeting warrant articles get a majority vote, that bar is going to go to 11-ish million?
Yeah, so right now we have 18.3 million in the stabilization fund. As I mentioned, the town will be transferring a little over 1.3 for one-time capital improvements. The school is 5.5 million for capital improvements that the business manager has brought forward. So the balance, if those pass a town meeting, would be 11.4.
Thank you.
And that's just in 1 year drop in the stabilization fund. And again, not to, and I want to move along, but the town over the next 5 years, including what we're asking for at town meeting, has a little over $9 million worth of capital improvements in its 5-year plan. That's just the town side. The business manager, Dave Libby, has his own capital improvements over the next 5 years. That's not included in that $9 million. So again, that just gives you an indication on how much we have to do in the community. And the stabilization fund is really the only source we have. If we don't use the stabilization fund, we're going to have to use operating budgets, which impact the town budgets, the school budgets, which we don't want to do. We want to separate our capital from the operating budget. We also don't want to borrow funds to fund these capital improvements because, again, the principal and interest payments have to go in the operating budget, which will impact town and school budgets. So we're very careful in doing that. That's why we work hard to build a stabilization fund. That's why we work hard to generate free cash to build a stabilization fund and utilize some free cash that I'll talk about in a minute for one-time expenditures. So this chart, and I don't want to go into in detail, this is just best practices from the Division of Local Services on the use of the stabilization fund. It talks about how communities in anticipation of economic downturn should be building their reserves.
Can I just interrupt? I'm sorry. For those of you who are kind of new to these concepts, I'm kind of new to these. Division of Local Services is a division of the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, just the like state version of the IRS. Okay, thank you.
Yep, sorry, I should have mentioned
No,
that.
that's okay. You use these terms, I'm sure, every day, like part of your vocab.
So, I think we all know that the state is going to have some financial challenges over the next year or two or longer. And the federal government, they haven't had a budget that goes longer than 3 months for I don't know how long. So we know that there's going to just be some economic challenges. So, the best practices under those conditions is always to stop building your reserves for when that happens. And you also want to have reserves, so you have, like the stabilization fund, to help with any, unforeseen needs or emergencies, and allows for flexibility. But the main thing out of this slide is reserves should be used to fund unanticipated and one-time costs, rather than the regular operating budget. And that's something that we do every year. It's part of our internal policies, and it's something that's important for financial stability. This is a free cash history. This is always a discussed area, an area that's a financial area that we discuss a lot. As you can see, our free cash has its highs and lows. The last 2 years, we have had substantial free cash, higher than we've had in the previous years. If you look at the years prior to '23, free cash is up and down. And what free cash is, it's the surplus at the end of the fiscal year that a town generates from revenues being higher than projected and from budgets that have surpluses in them that are turned back at the end of the fiscal year. So as an example, in FY23, when you see the highest point we had free cash, it was about $10.2 million. 5.5 of that was because our revenue projections for that particular year came in higher, were 5.5 million higher than we projected. And also, we turned back in surplus budgets $3.9 million. What's important to note, of the $3.9 million we turned back, 1.6 was in debt service, principal and interest, for the DPW school maintenance facility that we thought we were going to borrow in that fiscal year, but did not. So that money got turned back. We have since borrowed that, so you're not going to see that type of money available at the end of a fiscal year. But that just goes to show you how in 1 year you can have a large turnback that isn't necessarily going to be there in the next fiscal year. In regard to revenues, interest earnings in FY23 were $1.3 million. The previous year, we had a negative interest earnings because of the way investments were for the entire country. That gives you another idea how you can't predict how certain revenues are going to come in. So we're very cautious. People may say too conservative, but we're cautious to make sure that we do not put ourselves in a difficult financial position at the end of a fiscal year. So that's how free cash is generated. You can see the history. Some years are higher than others. The last 2 have been higher than normal. I gave you a couple of examples of why FY23 had a high number. FY22 also had money in there for debt service for a project, for the DPW project that we didn't borrow from. It was delayed for a couple of years. That helped boost free cash. This next slide, similar to a couple of slides ago, this gives you from the Department of Local Services at the Department of Revenue recommendations on use of free cash, best practices. The credit agencies always want to see you have a certain percentage of free cash available in your community to help with any type of unforeseen circumstances or emergencies. Again, the important part here is that free cash should be restricted to pay one-time expenditures, funding capital projects, or replenishing reserves. We are very consistent on how we do that. If you use free cash to supplement operating budgets, say as it was mentioned at the last meeting, if you used it for operating the school budget or the town budgets, you're not guaranteed that money each year, so you're building in a structural deficit into your budget on an annual basis. So we avoid using free cash to supplement the budget.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Montori? You know, it says a 3 to 5% target. If you have a healthy community, so to speak, would have 5% of its annual budget in free cash. Any surplus over that would go into stabilization typically?
Typically,
Would then be used for capital stuff?
it'll either be spent, so what we've done with free cash in the past, we use, and this is based on our policies, we use a portion of it to pay for one-time expenditures at October town meeting, both town and school, which we have done. We use a portion to go into the stabilization fund. We want to replenish, our goal is to always replenish what we spent at May town meeting, if we can do that. And then the third thing we do, we set aside funds, approximately $600,000 a year, if it's available, for future snow and ice deficits. We only budget about $256,000 for snow and ice. We always run over. Most communities raise that on their tax levy the following year. We don't want to do that because it impacts budgets. So we set aside free cash for that, as well as for any unforeseen emergencies that might come up.
Mr. Montori, one more question. So before you move from the slide, so as it relates to stabilization, roughly in the 10 years or so, because that's what you showed, how much of that has been used, say, over that same time period of the last 10 years for the schools, for capital improvements with the schools versus, say, police, fire, DPW, whatever else it may be? Do you have that available?
So over the last 13 years, because we try to keep a running total of this, over the last 13 years, we've used 8.9 million, well, that's including the 5 we're going to do at this town meeting. If you include what we're going to bring forward at this town meeting, 8.9 from the stabilization fund for schools, and 3.7 from free cash for the schools. So a total of 12.6 million.
Okay.
And that's not including, because it's hard to break out, how much we've put towards the design and work for the DPW school maintenance facility.
Yeah.
We've got a couple questions, too.
Sure.
The source of funding for free cash
Yeah.
is whatever revenues that the town had that came over kind of the projection.
Yep, that's one of them.
Yep. When local tax receipts are historically under what is actualized, that can buffer a free cash account. Is that correct? It can. I'm not saying it will, but it could.
It could. It could. It could.
Yeah.
But it's not a practice we like, because we like staying under the actuals from the previous year. And I'll go
course.
into that in a minute. Because it does a couple of things. One, it gives us flexibility if you have any mid-year issues. This year was a good example. It didn't impact operating budgets, at least not yet, but when the governor has 9 C cuts,
What's a 9C cut?
9 C cut is when the governor unilaterally can make reductions to funding, cuts in the budget. And
During the
sometimes
year?
it can
During
happen
the
any year.
Within the year?
Within the year, yeah.
Okay, got it.
And
Thank you.
having that type of buffer, which is a great word, gives us the ability to adjust if that happens. Now, this year, the cuts were in budgetary earmarks that we were fine, but let's just say the governor, with the approval of the legislature, reduces our local aid mid-year. We have nowhere to go. If we have this buffer, we can say, okay, we have enough of buffer, we'll get through this fiscal year. And that's the type of thing you want to keep that for.
How, has that ever happened?
A few years back, there have been 9 C cuts that we've weathered the storm because of our revenue.
That they lowered your local aid?
I'd have to go back in history to see if that's happened.
We're not talking about like transportation cuts or anything like that. We're talking about like complete local aid they cut.
I'm guessing, I can't verify, but we've had some tough financial times that I think they've done mid-year cuts.
And that was in like the COVID years, right?
No, I think it was well prior to that.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Didn't
Yeah.
that just happen this year?
08, 09, it was difficult.
They projected a cut in.
Didn't it just happen this year for Tewksbury? with
Yeah, but they weren't
firefighters?
local aid, it was
Wasn't local.
budgetary earmarks that luckily we hadn't
that you could use
built
free
in.
cash or stabilization to fund.
But you bring up a great point. COVID was a year, COVID hit in March. We were concerned we weren't going to get all the revenue we were going to get in that year. But we had enough of buffer, and we did some spending freezes to adjust. But that's a good example of something like that could hit. And, now your meals tax is impacted, your hotel motel tax is impacted, things like that. So the 9C cuts were different than COVID.
Another question I had was, the general recommendation by local services is free cash is between 3 and 5% of, is it like last year's operating budget, is that what it was, or the current operating budget?
It's the current operating
Okay, yeah.
budget they probably use. You probably could use either or. 'Cause
Yeah.
Our budget really doesn't go up too much to make a difference.
But our totals, currently, we're at over 7%. I think, and just to like, to speak for Ted more specifically.
Yeah.
It's not our belief that the town should pay out of stabilization or free tax. And I say that to the negotiating team of the school department, but then also to Mr. Matori. It's not our expectation that free cash is used to pay for recurring school department revenues, nor stabilization. But our expectation is that the funding that funds free cash historically seems to be underestimated, and I know that you're probably going to get to why. But comparatively to local communities, is pretty well underestimated, like just from our analysis. And I'll finish here. And so it seems pretty clear that there are recurring underestimations. And that recurring underestimation, if the estimation was more accurate, not even to 10%, maybe to 30%, if it was more accurate,
Yeah.
the budget would then be bigger, the current year budget would then be bigger, and that would balloon other department budgets, not just the school.
Yes. Yep, that's a good point. I'll get to that a little bit further, but I understand what you're saying, and it's a philosophical difference in approaching the
I
revenues.
agree. I think it's a matter of
Yeah.
values.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
So it's
Well,
And
at the end of the fiscal year, that local receipt, even if it was ballparked low, the money still shows up.
correct.
It's not like, it's not accounted for. It's showing up.
It's showing up,
Right,
but the
it's
budget
getting
has already
put
been
into
finalized. It's
stabilization.
showing up,
Right.
it's actualized in October, when the budget was finalized in May.
So.
No, I understand, but go ahead.
Yeah, so so the money is not lost, it's into free cash. We've used it for the one-time expenditures on town and school projects, been put in the stabilization fund for future capital for town and school. And what we've done also in the past is, we have an October town meeting every year. We look at our final numbers for state aid, we look at our new growth, we look at our revenue that came in from the previous fiscal year, and we have gone to town meeting in October in adjusted budgets. So that's also a common practice. So we've done that. And over the last few years, we have, and I'll get into it in more detail, but we have increased our revenues, our revenue projections, not to probably where people in the audience would like to see, probably not to where some departments would like to see, because everyone obviously could use more money in their budgets. But you got to understand, we need to put this budget together in a prudent way. And we don't want to have the town in a bad financial position at the end of the fiscal year. We don't want to have an emergency come up in the middle of the fiscal year. I don't think anybody, and I'm not going to harp on it, but anybody could have predicted what COVID was going to do. But we need to be prepared for those type of things. And I'll go into that in a little bit further, but I understand what you're saying.
I appreciate it.
So this is just a community benchmark of Tewksbury compared to Andover and Newton, which were the latest communities to settle contracts and most talked about. I just want to give you an idea of where we stand against them. Our FY20, our population is lower, obviously, than the both of those. Our average tax bill for FY23 and FY24, much lower than both of those. Our per capita income,
Can you explain what that is, Mr. Montori?
per
What
capita
is per
income.
capita income?
It's just the income per person in the community, for everyone in the community. And this is based on, it's 2024 DOR income information, but it's based on the 2020 census. So, and we're lower than the state average. I put the state average in there just as another benchmark. But what's interesting about this slide is a couple of things. There's a couple of columns that are important. The average tax bill in the town is 16% of the per capita income in the town. So we're the lowest per capita income in this group, but our tax bill is the highest percentage. Now, there's a reason for that. We have a very high debt exclusion number in our budget, higher than most communities. The community has been terrific in supporting debt exclusions for the fire station, the new elementary school, the high school, the library. We couldn't ask for better support from a community, but that does impact your tax bill, and it just shows how we have a higher percentage of our tax bill to the income. The other two columns that are important, the excess levy capacity. As you can see from these two columns in FY23 and FY24, we go right to our levy limit. We're not a community that has $500,000 or even a couple of $100,000 under its levy limit, that's where you really have a good argument, because
Agreed.
you can go to your levy limit, but you're not going to your levy limit. We go right up to the levy limit. Now, we can debate how we project our receipts all day, but we go right to our levy limit every year to get as much as we can for budgets. So I just wanted to point that out compared to the other communities. Just some historic budget information. This next slide just gives you a good indication of town and school budgets, how much the school budget, and when I say school budget, our education budget, it includes Shawshene Tech and Essex Aggie. The school runs around 60% to 62% of the budget, and each year you get 60% of the revenue. So the town, the split in the revenue has been fair between the town and the school, but this just gives you some history on the split between the town and the school budget, and the graph illustrates that also. Now, this slide is the local receipts. This is what we talked about. So these are the local receipts that we can debate whether we're underestimating or should be estimating higher based on what's actually come in. And as you can see, each year, we've had growth in the local receipts. FY23, our local receipts were over $14 million, but I want to point out the third row from the bottom, what we took in for interest earnings. And then go to FY22 actual and look at what we took in for interest earnings. A big difference. So we're very careful when it comes to how we project our interest earnings. As you can see from history, how it fluctuates. If you go back in years, we took in as little as $36,000 and as high as $2 million. The year we took in $2 million, that is when we borrowed. We borrowed money for the elementary school and the fire station, so we had cash on hand to invest. We don't always have that type of cash on hand. This year we borrowed money for the town, for the DPW school maintenance building, so we'll have high interest this year too, plus interest rates are at a record high that we're gaining in our investments. So this gives you an indication of where our receipts are. And you could see that, in FY21, our actual receipts were 11.1. FY20, they were 13.4. And in FY19, 12.2. So you went high, you went a little high, then you went low. It really fluctuates each year. When we project our receipts, and it was brought up at the last meeting about the methodology we use, we do go back and use 3-year averages. We use 5-year averages. We use 90% of what was collected in the previous fiscal year. We look at trends in our revenue, such as in building permits, if there were any one-time building permits that made license and permits, if you look at that section on the wall. In FY '21 and '22, it was over $1 million. FY '19 was over $1 million, but there were specific developments in those years that caused it to be that high. And we need to be conscious of that when we project. So we do spend a lot of time and make projections on our local receipts. And again, it's just debatable on the philosophy. This next slide just gives you some history on our local revenue projections. The top part of this slide, that's our total, what we budgeted for revenue and what we actually took in. So you can see the surplus that was generated. You get an 11-year average, a 5-year average, and a 3-year average of the revenue that has been generated in our local receipts because of our projection compared to actual. The next middle area, we take out what we call our non-recurring and recurring revenue from our local receipts because, just to go back a slide, if I can do that. Dave, can you back one slide? If you go back one slide at the bottom, you'll see non-recurring revenue. That's revenue we just can't count on each year. That's money from FEMA that we get reimbursements for, MEMA we get reimbursements for, any grants that came in later, like from that we're supposed to get a previous fiscal year, we get in another fiscal year. It's money that we in the past received during COVID. It's money that we receive for sale of town land if we sell land. So we don't project any revenue in that area, but yet we do collect revenue. And then you can see in FY '23, it was almost $1 million. Go back to the next slide, Dave. So when you take out those two areas from our revenue projections, and then you compare our budget, which is our projection, to what actually came in, you can see the 11-year average for surplus, the 5-year average for surplus, and the 3-year average for surplus shrinks. And then when you go further down, we did an exercise where we took out the non-recurring and the recurring, plus take out the interest income, again, because of its volatility. Our 11, 5, and 3-year surplus averages shrink. When you're talking about a $134 million budget, making sure you have a buffer, which I like that word, I'm going to use it from now on, a 2.1 million or a 2.5 million, and if you use our top numbers, even 3.4 is not a lot to adjust for an unforeseen circumstance. And then to two more slides, just these are some future challenges and issues facing the town that we need to be conscious of. Again, I mentioned, the town has over $9 million worth of capital in the next 5 years. The school, I know, has 5.5 this year, this coming fiscal year, that we're going to need to fund, which is all great, and that's why we have the stabilization fund, and we want to address those issues. Shawshene Tech assessment. Shawshene Tech does a great job, and their assessment is just unpredictable each year. I predicted it to go up 6% this year. It went up over 7%. We need to continue to watch that. The 9C cuts that were mentioned earlier, I am very concerned about how the state's finances are. I think there's a spending problem and a revenue problem, and I'm not sure how it's going to be corrected. Our state aid, based on the governor's proposed budget, is only increasing $84,000. My guess is by the time it gets through the House and the Senate, it won't change that much, if at all. I'm hoping it doesn't go down, but we need to monitor how the state finances are. The federal budget, as I said, we receive Medicaid reimbursements from the federal government. I don't think anybody can predict how that budget's going to go, especially with the election coming up and the fact that they can't even agree on a budget. Solid waste and recycling, this is a part of our budget that, went up over 6% when we negotiated the last contract. That's going to continue to increase. And then we have unfunded liabilities, our retirement assessment and our other post-employment benefit unfunded liability, which is retiree health insurance. So these are things we keep an eye on, and we're very cautious and conscious of when we're putting the budget together. I should have said I have 3 slides. This is another slide I want to show. This is a 5-year projection that I put together when I developed the budget each year. And this gives you an indication of where we are in FY24 and FY25. We have balanced budgets. In FY26 through 30, we start to hit deficits. And the reason for that is because
Can you repeat? I just didn't hear what you said.
So in FY '24 and '25, we have balanced budgets. In FY '26 through '30, we're going to start to have deficits. And the reason for that is we're seeing increases at the top of this chart in our budgets, the town and school budgets, increasing of salaries, assumptions and increasing operating budgets, health insurance, retirement assessments. And our revenue, other than going up the 2.5% for Proposition 2.5 plus new growth, the rest of our revenue is fairly flat. Now, we know that probably will change, but keeping it flat, we're looking at deficits over the next, through FY '26 through '30. And the reason why I want to show this is when we talk about the buffer that we have in our local receipts, that buffer is going to start to close so we can address deficits in the future like this. There are communities around us that are going for overrides now. They're in the millions of dollars. The lowest I heard was $6 million. We're not at that point. We have enough of a buffer in our receipts to adjust in the future for any deficits that we may have. And we'll address these deficits in other ways as we get closer to those budget years. But the point of this slide is to show you that we just can't take a given year's revenues and say, let's raise them so we can fund other departments. What are we going to do in the out years? We always have to plan ahead. And that's what this chart does for us. And then finally, this is the last slide. This just gives you, we're a AA+ community, rating community by Standard & Poor's. I wish we were at AAA, but I'm not sure we'll ever get there. But this just gives you an indication of what they had to say in our most recent rating review.
And that's the interest that you pay to borrow.
Right.
You borrow, the higher your rating, the lower the interest rate.
Correct.
It's better to have a lower interest rate.
Correct. So, we always get a good report card from Standard & Poor's, and we'll continue to get that because of the way we approach our budget, the way we approach our revenue projections, the way we build our reserves, and the way, in their opinion, they see we're fit to adjust any downward scenarios in the economy. So this just gives you an indication of that. And I can send this out to the membership if they want to see it, but that's it. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Any questions at all?
I've got a couple more for, I think, the school committee and then for the town manager. Based on the current budget that Mr. Libby had presented, I think back on like the 14th or so.
Yep.
Is your budget finalized?
No, the budget's not finalized. The budget,
When's the vote? When is the next school committee meeting to discuss the budget?
next week, we have another budget workshop. And as Mr. Libby always, kind of puts in his presentation, it's really kind of constantly tweaking things, whether it's coming out of salaries into operating or vice versa, for things that we just maybe didn't know about or learned about. And then ultimately that will be recommended from the school committee in the April meeting, and then it will be put forth per the finance committee at town meeting in May. And that's what will be finalized.
And the same applies to Mr. Montori.
So the Finance Committee's completed all of its reviews of the budget. They'll have a public hearing at the end of April, but as far as right now, the budgets are done. I still have collective bargaining agreements that are outstanding. So once those hopefully get resolved, those will change department budgets, but I set funds aside for that. Yeah, the budget is done.
Okay. So I think that's probably our primary concern with regards to negotiating in good faith, right? We want to have confidence that when we talk about salary and financial benefits, that the other side of the table is not operating from a, well, this is what we have perspective. They're operating from a, well, it's still not finalized perspective.
Well, yeah, but they do operate on it. This is, yeah.
I appreciate your response, I do, but I did initially say, like, I'm speaking to the school committee, so I would like to hear from them.
I'm happy to answer
Yeah, go ahead.
that.
Okay.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, the thing I would like to say is that we still have to follow a procedure and a process in the town. So knowing that this budget has to go to town meeting in May, we still, I mean, we're in the process of the review in January, February, March, and we vote on April. So I think we are in the process of doing that in good faith to not just the bargaining groups that we meet with, but also to the town of Tewksbury for the money that we are, accountable to. So we don't have the luxury of just, waiting until, we sort out all of our bargaining groups. So, as you know, we have 7. So, and you can add to that, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, and to be frank, I mean, we haven't even started any of the other units other than these 2. Because we know that this is a priority right now in the sense that we know that this will take the longest just given history, right? So we wanted to come out right out of the gate, late last year and say, okay, let's get this started so that by the time hopefully we get to a June 30th date and the school year is wrapped up, we have hopefully a yes across the board, right? And so that's our intention. And so right now, the way that the budget has been presented to us assumes the proposals that we have put out there for now. Again, now there are tweaks within that, right, that could be made.
I appreciate you acknowledging that.
So that's,
Can I just say, as I do represent this team, the district is not, it has to have its appropriation approved at town meeting. It doesn't set its budget. It establishes a proposed budget, which then gets submitted to town meeting. The district's not spending its own money, it's getting appropriated money from the town, approved by the town. So when they put together their budget, and when we negotiate with you, we're operating on what we anticipate will be the appropriation overall, and what the demands on that appropriation will be for this coming year, and then it has to, we move farther into years remote, in years 2 and 3, projecting what will be the anticipated appropriation.
Can I
So
just,
it's not the school committee's money.
do you mind if can I just follow up on that also? So when we look at the budget, when we develop the budget, we develop it starting in October, which is crazy, right? The fiscal year just starts, and we're already back to starting the budget. And we're projecting our expenses, 9 months out. So what I've already said to the selectmen, to the select board and the finance committee, and to the schools, that the budget process is a year-round process. So we put a budget together for January. We have guidelines we need to follow. The business manager needs to get a budget to the town manager by the first week in January. So we develop the budget and we put it together for town meeting in May, but that's not the end of the process. Right? That's really the beginning of the process. In October, we historically have come back and adjusted budgets once we know what our revenues are, or have better understanding of our revenues and how we can adjust.
When you adjust, but you don't adjust for recurring, do you?
We've done recurring.
Okay, you do adjust for recurring.
We have, yeah, if you go back to, historically go back over town meetings in October, and when we've had additional revenue, we have funded school and town budgets. There was one year, and that was COVID, and I keep bringing it up again, but in that particular year, we reduced budgets because of what was going on. But, so we adjust in October, and then again, this coming May, we're going to have a special town meeting. We're going to adjust budgets again. The difference is, in October, I can raise and appropriate from available revenue that we now know we have. In May, because we've already set our budget, I have to transfer from within budgets. So I need to identify budgets that are surplus and address budgets that are deficits. And we have a fair amount of them this year because of just costs. So the process really is year-round. So town meeting in May votes the main budget, but we are constantly going through it throughout the fiscal year.
Any other questions?
Can I make a request? So the last time you gave us this paper,
Yeah.
it had this breakdown on the back. This breakdown is much more helpful than this, like the high-low one. Is there any way we could get an updated one of these?
from you?
Yeah, you can send us a.
The
no,
one
no,
that says
this
major financial.
The year breakdown thing? This was on the first one you gave us, but not on the one you just gave us.
Yeah, I don't know if that was.
Do you want to see it?
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm not sure which.
No,
No, you know what? I think I have
it's a
it.
salary
The
table.
salary tables.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Okay, I think the salary tables are the same.
I don't think
aren't
this,
they?
yeah,
Those
so,
didn't
so,
change.
so
The-
what,
the-
Wait, but the numbers changed.
so I could tell you why the,
Oh, thanks.
do you want to say why the numbers changed? Yeah, so the numbers changed, Emily, just based on the assumption. Sorry, no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The numbers, the total numbers changed based on the assumption. Remember, we were working with an assumption that 50% of ESPs would go to a 7-hour workday and 50% would stay at the current workday.
Okay.
The new totals assume that all of the ESPs go to a 7-hour workday. So the amounts on the salary tables didn't change.
Got it.
But the proposal is still out there that for the first 2 years, the ESPs would have the option, just
I
to be clear.
understand. Okay, thank you, Rich.
Could I make a request, since we used a lot of the ESP bargaining time to do the presentation, could we like divide up the remainder equally between teachers and ESPs, do you think, or?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
That
we
makes
so,
sense?
yeah, because we have a few things we want to present.
Yeah.
I'm sure you might as
Yeah,
well.
we have a
And a
few.
few questions also, so, obviously, but I know I'm not sharing this part, so do we want to, math is,
If we go to like 6:20 with ESPs and then start teachers at 6:30,
that's good. Does that sound good to everyone? Yeah?
that gives another hour for ESP.
That sounds
Does that
great.
work? Okay. That's
great.
So,
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
excellent. So we'll talk everything you just presented. Thank you for that presentation. Emily, do you want to bring us into the ESP session then?
Yep, give me one second. I'm just going to move some things around. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Montori, for
Thanks,
presenting.
Rich.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
A
A lot of information.
lot of numbers. A lot of spreadsheets. Okay. So we have some things, we have like kind of a list. So actually, Rich just answered one of my questions, which is about why you had done the 50% move over, but I guess actually you just dealt with that, so we don't have to ask that question, so that's good. That's not hers. Okay, the rest of them are those. So last time we had asked a question about the bereavement language, which is a both unit kind of thing. So we asked why the language was changed to up to 5 days or up to 2 days. And then you said that you would discuss that. Did you have a chance to discuss that? Okay,
Yes, we
great.
did. We said up to, well, the up to was per loss. I hate to use that language, it sounds so horrible.
I know, that's,
I think that over time, everybody's mutually interpreted that language to mean per loss.
yes.
But, I'm sorry, let me finish,
I'm sorry,
okay?
yeah.
It's not per year. If you lose someone, you use your 5 days, and then you lose someone else close to you, you're out of luck. That's not, I don't think that's how the parties historically did that. So the up to only means if you don't want to take the full 5 days, if
Right.
you're ready to return to work, some people
Right, many
better
people
for
don't,
their
right.
grief process. But, you're entitled to take the full amount, but if you don't want to, that's why it was up to.
So, would there be, we're very close to this language and it's very exciting. Would there be a way we could say for the loss of each individual, 5 days, for the loss of each individual, 2 days? And let me explain why. The way I could see this absolutely being read is that the administrator could give up to, meaning denying 5 but giving 3. This language could really open the door for that, so.
It's not what we intended, so if we need
I
to change it.
understand that, absolutely. Yeah, totally fine. But because we're so close there, could we maybe talk about that kind of counter idea?
Yeah, we will, if, we hadn't intended to mean that anyone had discretion to short
Right,
people.
right.
So we'll figure, we can just
That's great.
revert, we can just take out the up to, if everybody
Okay,
knows
excellent.
you don't have to take all the days.
Yeah, and just to clarify, because it did come up, we did seek, were there any, we looked, was there any individual that had 2 losses of any particular type in the same year? And we did find one case of that, and obviously both bereavements were given for the, yeah. It's always interesting the way people perceive the language, so it's good to hear.
Well, and we have to, one of the things we're looking at too is like, long down the road when we are all in different, positions in life and whatnot, like does it get read? Because we are running into that from time to time in current language is, the people of the past were like, oh no, everyone's going to read it like that. And then you get to a certain point and you're like, that's not how it
Yeah.
comes across anymore.
We
appreciate
could
the
say,
intent.
you know what, we could say an employee may elect to take up to 5.
Per loss.
Yeah, that
Applicable
means
loss.
it's on
As
the,
long
it's
as
the
it
employee's
indicates
choice.
the per loss part versus the year, I think we'd be amenable to something like that. We just wanted to make sure that that was clarified. That
Yep,
was
we
all.
can do that.
Excellent, that's
Okay,
great.
cool.
I think we both mean the same thing. We just got to make the language, like you say, for
Yeah.
future people to, what is that?
Clarity is great.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the next thing we wanted to focus on was our proposal about ESP prep time. So we have some people who would like to speak on different aspects of the rationality behind the prep time. Sorry, I don't know where everyone's sitting. Okay, so I'm just gonna, we have a couple people, they're all from obviously from the ESP team, they're speaking to different aspects of it. So Diana's gonna go first from the high school.
So I'll be speaking from the point of view from the high school. I've worked there as an ESP for about 9 years, so I've seen a lot of students transfer in after the first of the school year. So when students transfer to the high school, they come from another town, state, even another country. They come here, we see their struggles, and we will do anything to make their struggles less, the transitioning better. Prep time for us is not for our benefit. It's to benefit the students. If we're prepared, they're prepared. Last year, we had many students transfer to the high school after the beginning of the school year. About half of them had an IEP or a 504.
What was that statistic? I'm sure.
About half of
About
them,
half? Okay.
yes. We've had many this year as well, as recently as last month. It's essential to review these education plans so we can become familiar with what they need and effectively support their overall well-being, mental, emotional, physical, educational well-being, so they can acclimate to their new environment. Sometimes family dynamics change. They're in a new place, a new home, moving. They have a lot going on in their life. If we're prepared and we can make coming to school every day easier for them, then this will help them and it will help the family. We don't have the time to review these plans. We would like to review these plans and help them transition. This is why it's important. So it's never been about for us. So we do the best that we can, and sometimes when we meet the students, it's like a crash course. And we have to work very hard to get them to come out of their shell and get them situated. So that's what we're asking for. That's the point of view from the high school.
Good point. Yeah, thank you.
So next up is Joanne.
And I'm going to be really short and sweet because I already talked about all this when we first met for negotiations. Sure. As I said, sometimes we work with 3, 4, 5 different teachers. I can't go into a classroom and be given an ELA assignment and know what I'm doing because they're not all in the same spot. I need to have time to meet with each teacher and say, today you're going to be doing this with so-and-so. Today, work with Johnny because Johnny was absent yesterday and he needs to catch up on this. She can't do that when I walk in because she's in the middle of lessons. So we need some time set apart in the day to catch up, basically. And to catch up in the morning, if you say, oh, well, if you come in and we change your day, you'll have that time in the morning to the 7 hours. Those teachers have duties, and I know we'll have duties in that 7 hours, so that still won't solve the case of prep time.
Do you envision, I'm sorry. Did you envision the prep being like a prep with the teacher? So you and whoever the teacher is, are prepping together?
We are open to whatever
So you
works.
weren't
If
sure.
it's 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, when this teacher's on prep and that teacher's on prep,
Just would
they
plug
may
into
have
their
different
prep.
times. Luckily, every teacher I work with is on prep at the same time. And this year, I do have time to meet with them, and it's invaluable, but there are times when you don't.
Right,
And there are aides that don't have any time.
And because, they don't have the time because they're with students.
Exactly, exactly. And even though our job is to work with students,
Gotcha.
we can't work efficiently if we don't have some time to converse.
Or with the teacher.
So,
Now, at the high school, sorry to belabor this, are you envisioning prepping with a teacher or not necessarily?
It could be with teachers. After class, there are times where, you know, we could hang back and we would talk with them, but we don't have the time because we have to rush to get to the next class.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely, we need to have time to talk with the teachers and discuss plans that could be in place for the students, and case managers, guidance. We talk to everybody.
Okay.
So I would also say too, from a teacher perspective, at the high school, it's a large. So there's 7 different teachers at most that an ESP can be working with. And there are situations, you know, there are some inclusion classes where there could be some social emotional things going on, and there's been times when I really wish that ESP would have hung back or been able to talk to me at some other point, because before we get to that next class, we need to chat about a game plan on how to deal with whatever is going on. So I guess echoing Joanne's, whatever works, right? But at the time that could.
We're just thinking about, you know, how there's so many moving parts in
Right,
any
exactly.
day, schedule, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just wondering how you guys envisioned it. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay.
All right, so that brings us to Heather, who's an ESP at the Wynn, and she's going to be talking about the connection between the proposal and the existing job descriptions within the contract.
So I'm speaking on a couple different aspects regarding the importance of ESPs having scrub time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
First-
thought, I wouldn't have asked the question if I had known you were going to present too. I apologize. I feel like I cut you off. Go ahead,
I
sorry.
might clarify some of those
Good.
questions.
Yeah.
First off, meeting with special education teachers to discuss goals. A lot goes into the collaboration of students' IEPs. ESPs are not part of the IEP team. However, ESPs spend the majority, if not their entire day, with these students. It's important for the ESPs to have time to meet with a special education teacher to learn about the individual student's IEP goals and objectives. The ESP's job description, which was only updated a few years ago, states to assist teachers in achieving the students' goals and objectives. In order to do this, ESPs need that time to meet with the teachers to go over these goals and objectives on a regular basis and see how best to support these students in achieving those goals across the school day, as well as updating the teacher on any progress in these areas. It's also important to touch base regarding any updates or changes to the IEP. And it's also listed under our performance responsibilities in the ESP's job description to communicate any problems or special information about individual students to the teacher. Prep time will allow us the time to communicate this important information. Also, knowledge of the curriculum, which is always changing. ESPs cannot be effective when walking into a classroom and not knowing the lesson information or plans. It also states in the ESP job description to help access and understand the general curriculum and skills. How are ESPs able to do this without knowing the information in the curriculum and being able to ask their own individual questions in order to best support the student's understanding? I do know for a fact that there have been ESPs in the district that have provided inaccurate information to students. It is no fault of their own. They simply thought that they were providing correct information due to their own misunderstanding of the actual curriculum. Meeting with teachers for prep time or having time to go over those lesson plans ahead of time to learn the information correctly and address any questions ahead of time will eliminate this from happening moving forward and be able to support students accurately and knowledgeably on both the subject as well as the lesson plans. Under the ESP's performance responsibilities, it states to work with students individually and in small groups or large groups to reinforce learning and understanding of the material and skills. Also, assist the teacher in implementing strategies for supporting the students and enforcing materials and skills. How are ESPs supposed to do this to the best of their ability without prior knowledge regarding the lesson? Again, prep time will allow for ESPs to do this to the best of their ability by learning the information and being knowledgeable of the lesson plans. Prep time is also important in regards to keeping updates with student progress on long-term assignments, to communicate where the student is on a long-term assignment, discuss any difficulties the student may be having, or possible adjustments to better support the individual students. Also important is to discuss current performance of students and what needs to be done that day to catch up a student that may be confused with material or a student who's been absent. What information is most important to focus on for the students to catch up? What would the teacher prefer we focus on first? What are the priorities? ESPs don't necessarily always know what would be the most important for top priority for catching a student up. And unfortunately, they could be off in their understanding of what is most important. Prep time will give ESPs the ability to check on this with the teacher and come up with a plan to move forward. And I would just like to mention a couple other things that are also in the performance responsibilities on the job description before I close. Prepare classroom materials and activities directed by the teacher, but how can an ESP be able to prepare materials if they're not sure what the lesson actually is in advance? Also, if there is time to have an ESP prepare materials or explain what the lesson plan is and what needs to be prepared, when does that preparation happen? Also, in absence of the teacher, ESPs assume responsibilities for the class. In order to do this, prep time is needed in order to be more knowledgeable and understand the information to help answer questions and guide students in the correct manner. Finally, I would just like to mention in the job responsibilities, it states to make effective use of preparation time in collaboration with the classroom teachers. So ESPs are supposed to be effective in collaboration during prep time, which ESPs currently do not have. In order to best serve individual students, we respectfully request much-needed prep time for our ESPs. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. All right, and then we have one more, which will be Kelly, speaking on the time to collaborate with certain specialist providers, so SLPs, BCBAs, those types of people.
Hi, my name is Kelly Joyce. I'm an ESP at the DLC at the Wynn Middle School. I've been there for 10 years. For ESPs and the DLC to have time to collaborate with a teacher is crucial. We have a chance to go over their IEP. Perhaps they have a behavioral plan in place, and giving us that time to collaborate with this teacher on how we plan on helping the student learn or assist them in their behavioral plans. Perhaps there are new issues arising with the student. Do we need to maybe meet with a BCBA to come up with a different game plan on how to squelch certain behaviors and help the student be as successful as they possibly can? If we could meet with the teacher and the BCBA to discuss current students' compilation of data and what, if any, changes need to be made to a plan that we're currently utilizing. Time to work on new approaches or a game plan for a particular student who's struggling with a teacher, or talk with a teacher about changes that could be made regarding the student's ACE program, which is a program we currently use to collect data. It would be nice to have time to create and laminate tools that I use to work with my students to aid them in being successful throughout the day in both their academic skills and their behavior. Sometimes DLC students can have an off day. How do we move forward from that? Sometimes we have to add additional staff to a student for safety purposes, and we need to discuss who's going to be with that, who would the additional staff be, and how we are going to, again, help the student be successful. Should a student have a serious behavior incident, it takes a lot of time to write up the incident report, discuss with the teacher what happened, what could have been done differently, what were the possible antecedents, and try and create a new program to help them be even more successful. Also, when assigning a different aid to a student, the behavior program needs to be reviewed with the aid as well as the IEP, so you know what you're up against when you take your student out into their specialists or to their other inclusion classes. Also, it's key when you have a new student, which we've actually encountered today, to be able to go over the IEP, the behavior program, if they're coming from another state. These are the most fragile students in the school, and we need to support them the best way that we can. The more information that we have and the more time we have to talk, discuss, and game plan is crucial. I happen to be a van monitor for a student in my room. I arrive at the school when the students arrive, and I leave the school when the students leave. The only time I have is a 25-minute lunch. I have no time to talk to my teacher if there's an issue. I maybe send them an email, scribble something down to them. We kind of talk in passing when we're working, passing out work, sitting with students and working. It would just be so ideal and so crucial to just have a moment to sit with my teacher and discuss the good things and the bad things with our students. Thank you.
I just had one thought to add on to that, based on something Heather was saying, is just thinking like bigger picture, the future of the Tewksbury District, educators, and the benefits of students. Not all the time, but there are many times where an aide or an ESP is an ESP because they're looking to grow to become a teacher, not all the time. But those who are, they would have the opportunity to see and hear what effective planning looks like, and that why behind our planning, why we're doing what we're doing, the decisions we make, how we deliver something to students, et cetera. So that would really help their professional growth as well.
And I just want to say one thing. As a teacher who has many ESPs in my room over the years, some of them I've had year after year, which is great, and through the outside contract company, sometimes I have multiple ones in a day for the same student. It makes a huge difference if I can sit down and say, okay, we're going to do this type of assignment, and perhaps, you know, they're normally on a different team. This assignment is a different style than normal, and I can literally explain the logistics of here's how this works. Whereas right now, I have to stop, I have to give directions, let the kids work independently. We both have to stop and talk right there in the front of the room. Okay, so you click on the link, and then that's gonna bring you to an article, and then they have to read the thing, and if you could help them read out the paragraph and find, you know, oh, it's in this paragraph, and they can read and find the answer. Now both of us are not working with my students. Both of us are wrapped up in this conversation, and I have to hope that I think I'm pretty good at explaining directions, but maybe the kids would disagree. But I have to hope that I get that across in these 2 minutes, and that they can maintain themselves for 2 minutes doing the activity while we have this conversation. And then at the end, I gotta kind of hope it worked because I can't ask because off they go. And then maybe it did, maybe it didn't, maybe tomorrow I'll have 2 more minutes to talk to them. So it makes the whole process very disjointed, and it makes everybody feel, including the student from time to time, a bit panicked about, well, what are we supposed to do? When the adult has to go ask, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't build a good rapport. But I appreciate everybody talking about our prep time.
Just to jump in
Michelle, sorry, go ahead.
you know, to piggyback on what Emily is saying, I too am also a gen ed teacher that has ESPs in my room a lot. The conversations do happen on the fly, and they often happen in the classroom in front of students. And these are conversations that probably shouldn't be happening in front of students, so we end up speaking in code. And in code doesn't always necessarily work very well. We're not very clear, and there can be miscommunications and things like that when we're trying to speak in code while our students are in front of us. Like Emily said, left to their own devices a little bit there while we're trying to nail down what needs to happen.
All right. And then what time did we say we wanted to? Do you guys have any questions or comments about anything?
I have a clarifying question. Just, so, and maybe it's different for K through 8 versus the high school, so I'll just maybe focus on K through 8 for a moment. When students leave, I'll say a gen ed classroom, to go to a special, the teacher is usually doing prep time, common planning, that may be a variety of different things, right? What is the ESP doing? Are they following the students throughout the? Okay.
So sometimes they're going to a different class for a different student.
Yeah.
It depends on what the IEP says.
Depends on what the IEP. Yeah.
So it changes a little.
Got
And
it.
none of us are with just one.
Just
class.
one.
It used to be.
Yeah,
that
I
way.
understand that.
But, so when that class is there, then we go to a different class.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, this is helpful.
So, like I said, we want to present on that. We do have a common proposal to kind of present the same fashion, but also in the fashion of wanting to make sure we give each other both time here. Do you have any things to discuss for ESPs that you'd like to bring up right now?
Did you say you had a new proposal?
No.
Oh,
No.
do you have?
We'd like to discuss our common proposal.
You want to
which
discuss
could
it,
blend
okay.
into either one.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we do have some stuff. You want us to do that now?
yeah, why not?
Sure. All right. We have a couple of modifications. And before I distribute them, I just want to orient you. We have a modified proposal / counter proposal regarding the short-term and long-term substituting. And then we have a modified proposal regarding tuition reimbursement. It's actually a counter to your verbal proposal too regarding tuition reimbursement. Okay. So it's kind of doing two things. And then we do have a response to one of your common proposals. So let me just grab my
Maybe it's the
couple of
same
copies.
common proposal.
So let me just do this. Might as well, while you're walking, we can pass them all out. They're all in the separate folders right now. This, and then a response to the common proposals, this.
Just take a few of them
Yeah, here you go.
And then you guys go.
Okay.
How's that?
Yep. Okay, so you should receive 3 documents.
Awesome.
They're coming around. Okay. Yeah.
The new one he just gave it. He said it's because he is, I think, because he is smart. Everybody probably is 7 hours. Because they'd be saving money instead of for 2 years, only having to do the same time. I will not be.
I think today's the 5th. It's the 6th.
But some people, I don't believe everyone would. But that's how they changed it. Right. I don't know. They hardly used to there.
You and me.
Paper number 1. Paper number 1. All right, let's see. All right, let's see.
A lot of red. Where I start getting confused.
Not for the same reason we love red. You can see that. Paper number 2. Sorry.
Yeah, I got it.
What's that? Oh, right. Okay. While these documents are making their way around, I'll first talk about the short-term and long-term substituting modified proposal. It says at the top, Article 5, Sections 4 and 5. The bottom, Section 5, there's no changes to our recent iteration. At the top, you'll see in bold the changes. So that we essentially changed it to first have a situation where the building principal will make reasonable attempts to solicit volunteers to do step-up substituting, and then if there are no volunteers after that, the principal may assign an ESP.
We don't have that one.
We don't have it.
It says short-term
We've got these two. We have early release.
We only have 2.
Oh, they're supposed to have 3. Parental. Okay.
So you'll have to start again.
He spent more time matching his shoes to his shirt. All right, sorry about that.
I was like, wait a minute.
Take 2, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Three, you should have 3. You should have 3.
All right. All right. Moving right along. All right, so you'll see the Article 5, Section 4 and 5. The Section 5 language is the same from our previous position. The one at the top, Section 4, is different. And we bolded the changes from last time to this time. The last time, we had the principal may assign. What we propose to do instead is to have the principal first make reasonable attempts to seek a volunteer to step up and substitute, and if that doesn't work, then a principal may assign an ESP to perform the step-up duties. Obviously, there has to be coverage. If there's an absent teacher and there's kiddos who don't have a person present to serve as the teacher in the room, there has to be a solution. And we understood the concerns that were raised last time where someone may wish to do it, that's fine, but some people may be really uncomfortable doing it, so they can say no, and then the principal will move along and try to find somebody else. And then at the end of that process, they do need the authority to assign someone. Again, otherwise there may be no coverage, and we can't have that. So that's our movement on that one. Any questions before we go on? Sure, Josh.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the district tied this proposal to half-day sick days, correct?
It is related, yes, it's still tied to that, and it has to do with the overall issue of when someone is absent, you need to move nimbly to try to cover, that person's absence. And so if if sick days are accessed in half-day increments, we anticipate it might increase the amount of time people are out of building, which, if they have sick time and if they're entitled to take it, they're entitled to take it. But we want to have a process where we can move to accommodate that.
So is the proposal still that if we would accept this new language, you would accept the half-day sick days?
Yeah.
Can I ask, what data points are you using for that anticipation that more people will be out of the building? Because it seems that in the current proposal, where you take a whole sick day, you don't. People who need a half day take a whole sick day. And when they're given the opportunity to take a half day, they're in the building more. Is there any data point, or is this just a objection?
It's a prediction, maybe it's my own, but there's also the issue that I should have mentioned, which is if someone takes a half-sick day sort of unexpectedly, like they leave early, perhaps, the district needs to be able to, act to make sure classes are covered. So we thought those two things sort of...
But Roseanne, that would happen now anyways. If someone all of a sudden in the middle of the day was ill and needed to go home, that would happen anyways. So I guess what the question was, and it's exactly my question.
It might happen more.
Where is the data that would support that there would be more people out of the buildings if we introduced half-day sick days?
We were just assuming that it would happen more.
In the other districts that I've worked in, that is not the case. In fact, it probably lessens the use of sick leave because people aren't having to take an entire day to do a doctor's appointment that they can't reschedule for another time.
I just have a question. Are there other districts that have half-day sick day policies like this? And are they having any difficulty getting substitutes to just want to do a half-day?
No, because in fact, I even have districts that do by hourly, right? You can take an hour at the end of the day. And what generally happens is that there's a sub that gets called for the day, but they sub for multiple people in the same building because inevitably there's going to be more than one person that's going to be out in a school, right? So that one sub is now subbing for two people instead of just one person.
They're kind of floating in that building as needed, is that?
They're not floaters. They're
They're just
even,
half this
even
day,
just
half-
daily, even
Yeah,
just a
half.
daily sub that gets called in. They get called to the elementary school to cover for, Miss Smith in the morning, and then in the afternoon, Mr. Jones is out, and they're gonna go cover
I
for
think
that.
before we finish, I know there's somebody else that wants to chime in. I think the superintendent wants to just catch up with you.
I can just share with you, I would say, I don't know if I am anticipating more absences other than I think you hit it, that need to pivot quickly in the middle of the day. We do have difficulty providing substitute coverage for all teachers all day. And when it's unexpected and you still don't have someone in the building, extra or movable, this would help with that.
So can I ask a follow-up to that? Is that how often are people leaving in the middle of the day because they got the stomach bug?
I would have to talk with the principals to give you any type of number.
Yeah,
But
and in
it
that-
happens regularly.
And in that
Yep.
situation, though, we have the use of the ESPs potentially to cover for those probably not regularly occurring illnesses that happen in the middle of the day.
But only if they agree to do it. They don't have to do it if they're asked.
This was the crux of, I think.
Do
the-
you find that there is a problem where you can't find anybody? Because I'm not pointing this in any particular direction, but I don't believe we have a situation currently in any building where we're like doing classes in the library or in the auditorium because we don't have staff, unless I'm unaware of something. So that means that we are currently covering what is popping up, which that amount probably wouldn't necessarily shift too greatly.
Right, I think that to Dina's point she originally made, those unexpected leaving half day early are gonna happen whether you grant us half sick days or not, because if we're sick, we're sick. We have to, we gotta leave, right? So to me, yes, those are gonna happen, but they're gonna happen whether we get half sick days or not. If we have planned half days, that would obviously be notified in, say, Frontline ahead of time, and then it's much easier to plan for sub coverage.
It's easier, yes. If you, look, this is a package as of right now. If you caucus and come back and treat them as separate, you can do that. You can propose back to us accepting one and not accepting the other one, or proposing back a modified version of either one. We're just presenting it as a package.
Wait, I'm sorry. The package is.
The half day.
The half days?
Okay, so I thought there was a two, okay, I thought there was
Yeah,
a step one
yeah.
on.
But it doesn't restrict you from making a response in any way that you see fit,
To keep us just, yes, thank you for that. To keep us just organized here, do we have any questions pertaining to the actual ESP part first before we?
Do you have any data on how many aides actually refuse to do it?
I don't, as I sit here,
I have never heard of an aide come to me and say, I refuse to do it. Or question me as the union rep, this is what happened. So I'd like to know, that's something else you could ask the principals. Are there really aides? I like them to have the opportunity if they're not comfortable. But how often does that actually happen, that you need to put it in our contract that we don't have the right to refuse? Or that's what's in there now, or to change it, I should say.
I'll get that information as best we can with the people we have
I
here.
think the question is, does it happen?
Does
Do
it
people
happen?
decline?
And if it does happen, has it happened once, or has it happened over time a lot? I'd just be curious.
Okay. We'll try
Joanne, I
to get that
think, just to be
information.
fair, I think the change in this language was in response to the fact that, at least to my understanding, that ESPs did not want to be forced into
Exactly.
being asked to step up, potentially even in a situation where they didn't feel comfortable for
Exactly.
whatever reason. So this was a response to that, to simply say, the principal will make an attempt to solicit, and then if there are no volunteers,
We have to do
we
something.
have to do something to facilitate that. The half sick day, forget that. I mean, it could be for any reason. It doesn't have to necessarily be for a half a sick day,
That's why I
right?
asked on that. But right now, it has always said, we have the right to refuse.
Yeah.
I want to know what data supports you taking that out and not giving us that right anymore. Why are you not giving us that right to refuse? Why are you telling us the principal can force us to do it if he can't get anyone else?
Because they need to get the
But have you
coverage.
ever had the problem where the aides have said, nope, I'm not going to do it?
Let me put it to you this way. If that has never occurred, then why are you resisting this language?
It's a bit punitive.
If they're all volunteering, then we will never have to invoke the assignment piece.
Okay,
And it keeps autonomy on the ESP,
Right, it does.
and
But-
it's something that we would like to protect.
Well, yes, you would like to protect that, and the district would like to have the administrators able to make sure a class is covered.
But
If
there's
it-
no problem why.
I'm sorry?
Can I add?
There's no problem why.
Can I add to the conversation?
We'll have we'll have to caucus.
I just
over
wanted
that,
to add, there was another layer that we heard, was that it may be that, Joanne, your principal comes and asks you, but what you know and your teacher knows is there's something really critical you're needed for. You can say, and your teacher could say, this isn't the best day for me to step up. Can you ask someone else? So that was part of what we heard and shared with the principals as how would that work now? And I can tell you, absolutely, the principals shared that there are people who that is not their comfort zone, or for whatever reason refuse. But again, they're scrambling quickly to make sure a class is not unattended. And sometimes an aide will say, I'll take the first block, I can't do all day. And that's the flexibility that this language was intended for, if that helps.
And let's face reality. Yes, the autonomy of an employee is honored to the extent that it can be. But at the end of the day, principals have to run their buildings, and they have to direct people to do things, you know? But in this case, they will only go to that option if they have to. They'll try to make it voluntary, but at the end of the day, they have to have that safety net. That's all.
And I think that's where just our question is that you guys, we would love if you caucused about is, has it been a problem?
Yes.
Has that happened where there's truly not a body to watch a class and they have to force somebody who doesn't want to?
It's not so much forcing people, as I understand it.
This-
and I'll
this would be,
verify.
though.
So then we can take that language
Let me
out.
let me back up. There's a discomfort level of making it purely voluntary all the time. That's all, okay? They need a safety net. They need a safety net.
So I'm going to rephrase Emily's question. Is there a scenario in which, maybe there's a scenario in which one ESP rejected the step up, but is there a scenario in which the principal went through this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and exhausted all possible ESPs to step up? Does
I'll
that make
get
sense?
more detail for you. I'll try to today. If not, we'll come back at another
So
time
I
and get
just,
more detail.
I have an overarching comment that speaks to the ESP concern, as well as the tie-in to the half-day. It seems as though the foundation of your kind of parallel offers is not rooted in any actual data, right? We don't, I mean, maybe they exist, but you haven't presented it. There's no data as of right now that suggests we've never been able to cover a class when we've absolutely needed to in pivot. And there's no data to suggest that half-days will increase, absences in classrooms will increase when you give a half-day. And so it's really difficult to offer logical, thoughtful proposals when the response is, we're worried, but we can't prove it.
Can I speak to that? We've discussed in our committee meetings over the past 2.5 so years, the difficulty in getting substitutes. So that was why I asked this question was, we've done things that have tried to entice people to come here as substitutes by paying more money, by the app that they rolled out, a few different things. It's maybe not an aggressive approach, but I think, there have been some solid efforts made. And I think my thinking in some of this, as it was being discussed, was the concern for finding substitutes. And I think that does remain somewhat a concern in the district.
And
So
again,
that's
you
a little
can
bit of a thoughtful
respond to these proposals separately. You don't have to respond to them as a package. But we're reserving our right to treat them as a package. That position may change.
Excellent.
It's
So,
negotiation, folks.
Yes. Okay, so 6:20 is when we're ending. We just have one more thing maybe to talk about here. We can caucus for the remainder of time and then maybe.
We didn't.
Do you want to go to the rest of our?
You have to just put these to the side.
Three
That's fine.
papers.
We get, just quickly, the tuition reimbursement, we have, this is a counter. The Section 3 piece is the only piece on this document that changed.
Yep.
The stuff up top is the same. So we have countered your verbal proposal with agreeing to this language on tuition reimbursement. And I believe it's self-explanatory. Yeah.
This is your language.
There's a $10,000 aggregate pool. And one course per year, per person, up to $1,500, first come, first served basis, which I believe is in the teacher contract, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, so there's, yeah, and then there's some, the steps that need to be taken to make sure that it's reimbursement eligible. But I know you want to get to other things, so.
Thank you.
And finally, this is easy to comprehend, I think, the counter on the parental leave. This hits both the teacher language and the ESP language, and we're proposing to increase the amount of sick days that can be applied to a non-birth parent, foster parent, or placement of a child parent from currently what it is 10 days. We propose to make that 20 days. Okay.
All right. Any questions on any of that? Okay, so do you mind if I just talk for a second, just to see?
Do whatever you want.
Would we like to caucus and then go into the common at the next session, or do we want to talk about the common one now? I feel like maybe we want to give ourselves like 10 minutes to chat, and you all 10 minutes to chat, and to wrap up this session.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep.
So maybe 6:15ish we'll text if either side needs more time. Is that great?
Yep, sure. What time?
6:15?
6:15.
Got it, thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, motion at adjourn 6:03.
We're good.
That's all right, my son.
I figured out like 3/4 of the way through the meeting.
6:21.
There, and it's Pebble Beach.
Sorry, my voice is terrible right now. Thank you. It's like, we're resuming at 6:21. I'm sorry.
6:21.
My voice isn't carrying so well today. Thank you. Thank you for the extra minutes.
No worries. All right, so I know we're concluding right now our ESP session. We just have a maybe final point or two we want to make. And then after that, do we want to do the break or do we want to go right into the teachers? It's up to you. We're amenable to either.
Maybe a 5-minute break.
5-minute break is fine. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Joy, did you want to, I had a point you wanted to make, but.
I do, and it's maybe a good thing that I've been around a while or not a good thing. But going back a couple of negotiations ago, our contract used to say, in the absence of the classroom teacher, the aide would step up and assume responsibilities for the class. It also gave us the right for refusal still, because that's always been in there. At our negotiations, a couple of times ago, we were told in order to finalize everything, we had to take out that line, that we would step up and assume responsibility. And I asked why, and they said, because some of the principals don't feel that all the aides are qualified to step up. So my comment was, which insulted me immensely, and my comment was, well, you hired them. How can you say they're not qualified? They're in that room every day. They know the workings of that classroom. And I said, do you mean to tell me, and I remember this plain as day, do you mean to tell me that a college kid on spring break is more qualified than some of the aides you have working for you? And I was told yes. So that was why that line came out. And now I have a hard time forcing aides to go back in.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to bring that up, but
good
I thought
historical
it needs to
information.
be said.
Yeah, it's good, it's helpful.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think the bottom line really, and we get it. You know, nobody wants to be forcing anybody to do anything they're not comfortable with. That's clearly not the intent of anyone sitting in this room. And they know it's not good for you, it's not good for the kids. We want to make it voluntary. They'll try their best to make it voluntary. But again, and I know there are some anecdotal examples that we could share with you, that there have been times when the principal or some administrator or somebody else had to go into the class because it just was not an available aide to go in. It's a rarity, but it has happened, right? So as a last resort, the district is proposing, and this is negotiation, you know? This is a departure from our prior position. We're making this proposal better for the aides than it was when we first walked in last time. We're making it, first we'll seek a volunteer, then if we can't, we'll have somebody assigned. Last resort, that's all, you know? And again, we can't agree with you more that we don't think it's in anybody's interest to force people, but at the end, we have to have that ability if it comes to that. We hope it doesn't.
So did
That's
we
all.
find out from talking to the principals how many times that happens? That aides refuse and every aide in the building refuses and they have no coverage? Does that
There have
happen?
been situations where, first of all, not every aide can do it because they have a task that they can't be pulled from, but there was an occasion here and there. I'm not saying it happens a lot. I'm not saying that, but it has occurred a few times, maybe even a handful of times, where they were faced with a situation where of those aides that were available, they had a gap in coverage. And
Okay, because
somebody else.
In one of your papers that I was looking at, and of course I won't get my hands on it, but it said something to the effect of they've used aides over the past 2 years, something like 1,068 times.
For step up, I'm sure
So that
that's
means
accurate.
We're covering.
Yes, absolutely. The
Yes.
vast majority of times, yes.
Yes, yes. And
Absolutely.
sometimes
Nobody's arguing with
principals may
that.
have to step in because all the aides are being used.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. But what I'm saying to you, I think we're in agreement. That is the vast majority of cases where people are willing to do it. In fact, we hope that the upkick in the money that we're offering is going to entice people further to make it a voluntary situation. But again, there's a handful of cases that have occurred that I keep saying, the district simply needs a safety net if that has to pass. No disrespect intended, obviously. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and whoever's made those remarks, I know that wasn't me, you know?
Not you.
Like, we don't have to go there, but I'm
didn't
sorry that
negotiate
you
with
had
you
to
back
listen.
then.
I'm sorry about that, yeah. Anything else from the school committee side?
Well, just, not on this one, but
On the other piece?
Yeah.
So you, as you know, we have a proposal to make a 7-hour workday for ESP. Obviously, they would be compensated for the extra time because they're hourly. And if the ESPs were in agreement with that length of workday, the committee is prepared to work on carving out some time within that extra in the workday to make it preparation time. We're just trying to figure out again how all the pieces are going to work. We're not sure we can guarantee time with a teacher, though. But a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that folks wanted to get their hands on, you know, before they encounter students, could occur in an exchange like Google Docs, or what's the drive we use, the confidential, the drive. So they may be able to have a teacher like transmit information to them or leave it for them somewhere, you know, protected place, that they could grab it and read it on their own time or something like that. So it may not be a perfect correlation to what you're looking for, but we might be able to, you know, respond to that in some way if we are able to work with a 7-hour workday.
Okay. And I think the last, maybe just to add on to that, the piece to kind of fit into the puzzle, because every school's going to be a little different, obviously. It might be a little easier at the secondary grades, middle school and the high school, versus the younger grades you get, where you are watching kids throughout the day, before school, after school, with certain duties, right? So trying to find that piece where those ESPs can connect with teachers might not necessarily be 5 days a week, but the intention is there, and that's what I think we're going to try and maybe do behind the scenes between now and our next meeting to try and figure out how that would look, what that would look like.
And we even discussed the possibility of maybe at each building, there might be like a scheduling group that might work out the details.
Some buildings did used to have scheduling groups for a long time. They used to work in.
Anyway, just kind of trying to figure out a way to get some part of the way where you proposed, you know?
Great. Thank you.
So before our break, I just want to kind of go into what our plan here going into the teacher one is. We actually we have a few more points on half-sick days we would like to make for our common proposal once we get back. We also have one other proposal that we'd also like to go into, but that would also leave time for you guys to also, whatever is on your docket, if anything, that way we can kind of go maybe half-sick days, whatever you'd like, our second thing, and then whatever remaining time. Does that sound good?
Yep.
You bet.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Okay, so take five?
Motion to adjourn for a 5-minute break?
Sure. Motion 6:30 PM, come back at 6:35.
Going back to 8?
Okay, we resume at 6:37 PM.
All right. Before we talk about the comment, we heard your counters, we gave counters, and I kind of like, we went through my notes. We had some questions last time, not sure if you guys were able to discuss them, so I'm just gonna re-ask those questions and see if you guys had time to discuss. Just so we don't have many formal responses yet, because all those questions were hinging on it.
We'll
but-
just add to stuff that you need to talk about in response when you're done. So
All right,
we'll give you a nice big pile.
Okay, great, awesome. Okay, so, going to our counter, is the proposed, our counter to your original proposal, is the proposed student time going to change because of the busing, assuming we keep the 7-hour workday? It was asked last time, but obviously you needed time to confirm.
So if the workday stays 7 hours, are the start and stop times going to change? I don't know. Do you know the answer to that, Brenda?
Yeah, we think the buses will run better on
Okay.
that student schedule. We weren't sure how the Ryan and Center could kind of coexist at the same schedule, but given the numbers of students we're seeing riding, and that loop road being able to handle a ton of parent cars, we think that the time that we spend going from the shared buses between the Heathbrook and the Center and the Dewey and the Center would be eliminated, because we'd be sharing buses with schools that are on site with each other.
All right,
And
so-
it'd be a better use of our bus resources.
Perfect, okay. So I just-
And then, as you know, we discussed throughout the school year, as we opened the new school, there was that potential that the center needed to change the start and stop time of teachers, not the student, not the total day. That's still a consideration when we start a new school year, potentially with 2 schools at the same student time. We still are yet to understand what that looks like in the afternoon.
Okay.
The morning, we were fine. The afternoon is where we knew we had a tight. So I think that still would be a consideration if, as needed.
Excellent, okay. Go out the same vein. Are you still looking, if the 8-hour change does not occur, are you still looking to change staff hours for any school? Are you looking to propose staff hour changes?
That's what I think I was talking about.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was on the screen
Yes.
still, okay.
The center was at the forefront with the 2020, back to the way it used to be, if needed. But that's, again, nothing's etched in stone at this point.
Excellent. Next question. Sectioning of the preschool language under Article 8. I think that was the prep time change from 75 to 65. Was that what that was?
Yep.
We asked for the rationale. Do you guys have the rationale, just so we are able to process that a bit more?
I don't do it.
Yes, the 10 minutes did not go away. It was added to the beginning and end, which a little bit later, you'll be able to see that in a visual.
Okay. Thank you. And then there was those 2 Appendix B changes, detention to restorative justice, and I should have written the other one, but I did not.
Yeah.
It was like a media,
Media something
like
or
that,
other, yeah.
We just want to hear the rationale of those name changes.
Yeah.
I'll do my best, John Ware. It really was, and John, feel free to jot this down, an update to the language based on the current, it's not just a literacy magazine, it's media. So it was updating the title to the current times. It's less punitive, more restorative, educational discipline. So it was really updating the language of what that, I don't want to call it a club, summer clubs, to what is really occurring today, in today's day with the students.
The intention wasn't to, I'm sorry.
Not to change
Not to increase the burden on the person holding the stipend, but just to make, things
the
evolve
title.
with the times, yeah.
Excellent, okay. And then the other one was, what position was that, Erin? Was it the media specialist one?
It's the same.
That was
There were
changing-
2 media
It was
ones.
the second one.
Yeah, the same intent.
Okay, so not like a dramatic change to the condition of what that.
Oh, but as you know, over time, if someone's holding a stipend for a number of years, the way that they approach the duties changes, it evolves over time. But there's, like we said, there's no intent to increase the burden on the person doing that advisorship.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But I think I would have a follow-up question
only because I've seen what detention looks like at the high school level. In thinking of like what restorative justice like means, it usually involves like conversations, multiple parties, and that's not what happens at the high school now. So I think that was kind of the concern with, is that position of a restorative justice at, in my mind, the high school level, going to change to more of a meeting facilitator kind of thing, position.
I don't want to talk, I mean, I don't want to answer, and I know John can't, but when we come back, I'll have him answer that.
Thank you.
It may be that the title.
That wasn't the intent.
Right, the title reflects the philosophy that detention is a type of, we hope, restorative justice.
Educational process.
Discipline is to teach, right? Those of you who know what the root word means teach, right? Not to punish necessarily. So, yeah.
And we have two questions with the opposite side, so I think that was your counters to us. I think that's what I'm...
I know, we're losing track of what...
Kristen asked about Unified Specialist PLCs, and you said to get back to us. Do you have an answer for that?
We have the counter.
Oh, yeah, we'll yeah.
And then there was also with the counter to the coaches, you didn't want to put in the language that the content director, like literacy director or STEM director, solely would be it, and we just wanted to hear, who else did you have in mind for being evaluators?
Can I speak to that? Mm-hmm. Only because, so say, for example, Jason Stamp is the coach's evaluator, and Jason goes out on leave, and all of a sudden, I have to step in and do that. That's really the idea behind that, or the principal does that. But it would mostly go to the district director, but just in the event that it didn't, and we would need somebody else, we can't like promise that.
Okay.
That was the only.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So that being said, would we like to go into the common and just hear what?
Yeah, you please feel free to
All right,
proceed.
excellent. We kind of already have kind of started talking about this, but I figured we want to kind of formally go into the half-sick days a little bit and the benefits of such. As Roseanne said, this is negotiation. We've gone back and forth quite a bit with that being tied to the ESP. We're not going to focus on that at this point. I think both sides have made that pretty clear. But it's healthy to have this discussion and hear rationale. So Emily's going to start us off with a reason why half-sick days we think would be more beneficial for staffing, students, and just logistics of the day.
Yep. So a prior administrator at Heathbrook in the past had blatantly told multiple staff members to call out sick instead of coming in or leaving early, like say 15 minutes to an hour, right, for an appointment. We were told, no, call out sick. Like I can't get you coverage, or we don't do the half-sick days or whatever it is. It would baffle us because we were like, well, isn't it preferred to have us there for the vast majority of the day versus a sub being there the entire day? So that definitely confused us on that one. In sick days, the half-sick days would prevent this, greatly benefit students. We would be there for at least a half a day for the morning or the afternoon. So I'm thinking particularly in my classroom, if I was there for the morning, I not only could touch base with my aide or whoever the substitute was that was booked ahead of time, I could be able to talk to them and tell them person to person what the rest of the day looks like, as well as my kids. I would tell them what I expect, what they're going to have for the rest of the day, and the follow-through would be far better on both ends. And then in reverse, if I was going to be out in the morning, the afternoon before, I could make sure I either touch base with my aide. I don't know if I'd be able to talk to whoever the sub would be the day before, but also, again, lay out for my kids what the expectations would be in the morning, what they're going to be doing, and what it will look like when I get back. So just great benefit to the students, honestly. And with that, I believe Erin is going to piggyback from there.
Yeah, just to follow up that like everyone was saying, like it is in the student's best interest. The assignments that we give when we're out are dramatically different than the assignments and the activities that we can do when we're there. So if at least part of that day you can be with your classes and give like better instruction, like isn't that better than being out the entire day and giving like more menial activities?
I'd like to just piggyback on that. I had a doctor's appointment this morning. I can't take a half-sick day. my entire, 100% of my roster missed out on meaningful instruction. All the work was, if we go back to hybrid land, asynchronous, which we all agree is not in the
Hate
best
that
interest
word.
of students.
Same.
Yeah, just one other thing. From a teacher perspective, planning for a substitute is far more work than actually being out, right? So it's not something we particularly like to do. If I were in the situation where I needed a doctor's appointment and I could only choose between the hours in which I'm working, for me, I would be thinking in my head, my kids are going to lunch and recess and gym. I'll be in the morning, I'll teach in the morning, and then for the substitute, I can leave, take them to gym. Take them to lunch and recess, and they get the benefit of me teaching them for the portion of their day, and then that half day could be covered by a substitute who's just simply walking them to gym or, you know, taking them with maybe a few other little things filled in. It just gives more teaching time for teachers to do for their students in face-to-face.
So as of now, we do have staff who already have been docked half-day sick days for either they've been sick or their children have been sick. So on their, their sick time, they have a 0.5 already on there, but not able to use again. And it's been sitting there from many staff over and over and over again. So those days that you're saying, oh, we can't plan for them, well, those things still happen, meaning you do get sick, some staff, during the day. They have to go home and coverage is going to happen, as well as children get sick and you're called out and you have to leave because you have a child that's sick. And so those things still happen, and people have a 0.5 sick day. Having the half-day sick day is not only beneficial for things like that, with kids get sick, those are going to happen no matter what, but also people who have chronic diseases and they're not really sick for the day, but they have specific treatments that they have to have, and they go when the treatment is, so they can try to plan and be in school for the majority, whether it's the morning or the afternoon. They're not sick, but they have to get to these appointments. We talk about pregnancies. They're not sick, but they need to get to the doctor, and it's not always, they can't get there. There's no appointments at 4. High-risk pregnancies. So they need these half days instead of taking a full day off, because being in the classroom is where we need to be. Most staff don't take sick days. I mean, I don't. And if I do, I'm sick, really sick. I come in sick, because it's harder, just like Michelle said, to plan for a full day. I'd rather be in doing my job than home. So, again, half days, I think staff would be in more and you would have less staff out. And then subs could be shared. They go into frontline, someone could nab a half day at the doing school. And then, guess what? It's only half day. I can also put in to go to, in the afternoon at the Heathbrook. So one sub could do either multiple buildings or multiple half days in one building.
I think, I don't think there's any question that this benefit would be, great for work-life balance, for all the things that we know make workplaces, better. But I just think from our committee perspective, just assuring that on the district end, this isn't going to leave a gap for your students too. You know what I mean? So, and I think that just revisits that same other conversation. So, I would never argue with you that this isn't a good benefit. It sounds like, what people need in life.
We do hear that, and I know that it was mentioned earlier, the concept of this is causing stress for principals or admin about like how to cover. I will say, I think that where we came from in proposing this is different than where you may have the impression that we came from. The reason we're suggesting half-day sick days is because when we did our initial survey, lots of people wanted them. But the reason they wanted them was solely so they didn't have to be out as much. That was it. There was not a single survey person who came up and talked to us, and there was not a single person who came up afterwards to us and was like, we really need to do this, was because they wanted to only have 11 a.m. doctor's appointments or something. It wasn't that. It was, I'm sick of having to be out all day because I can only get a 1 o'clock appointment. It is, I know that it may have been a while from the people who were educators on the panel who have since been, but it is so much effort and stress to be absent from this job. It is, to Michelle's point and Mary Ellen's point, you often are sitting there going, well, how sick am I? Not sick enough for the stress tomorrow, so I'm going to go in. Whereas the reason we're suggesting this is because people want to be in the buildings and with the kids. This is the easiest way we can think of it. And nearly everyone we have spoken to, they're still going to plan it around the most convenient time for the district. So right now, like, I would never take an afternoon half-day sick day on a Wednesday because I am going from lunch till bell. But, you know, I could miss my prep in the morning. I'd be okay with that. And it's less stress for me, it's less stress on the district. That's where people on this end are coming from. It's actually an attempt to stay in the building more, because it is annoying to be out and it is not great for the kids. And you know, you spend a lot of time making good assignments and curriculums and activities. You don't want to have to waste it on like read page 30 through 36 in the book and answer question 4. It doesn't have the same
No,
feel.
I think we hear the spirit in what you're proposing it. I don't think, there's any question on that at all.
Emily, can I was going to start by saying I didn't want to speak for Bridget, but Bridget actually spoke, and so this is, and we're actually kind of in agreement. So yeah, this is a wonderful benefit, and I see it as a wonderful benefit for exactly for the same reasons, Emily, that you just said. I think it was more about tying it to the ESP step up was more about just logistically having that alternative option versus trying to go out and find a substitute teacher for 11 to 2 p.m. 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Whatever the half day might look like, right? I know it might look a little different at each school. And so logistically, it was just trying to give that alternative option to say, hey, okay, we either need a substitute this day for this particular time of the day, or we have enough ESP coverage potentially, and we just need to make sure that we seek those ESPs out, of course.
The data shows that the aides will step up.
No doubt.
Way more than not. It was 1,000, I don't remember the exact number, but way more than not that the aides are gonna step up
No disagreement.
instead of forcing them to do so. We also talked about there are other districts where this does work. We talked about Westford, Chelmsford, Belmont, just to name a couple, where they have the half-day. It does work. It might also appeal to some subs that, you have a parent that maybe has a kid in half-day kindergarten, so they can only work a half-day. This would be a great thing for them to get into the kid's school, get into the district, and...
I don't need any more convincing. You don't need to convince me. I'm in agreement with you. I'm in agreement. I appreciate the sentiment, but we're in agreement, so...
But I think, because Jill just made the point that I was going to make about like the benefits to the subs, and I do think that Frontline has been great, and the additional pay has been great, and I do think that those are steps in the right direction. But I think this is another step, and I think having flexibility for people who want to work part-time will increase subs in the district, which would alleviate some of that worry that is not data proven right now.
I hope so.
I do want to add in, just to that, I'm happy we agree. And I think from our standpoint, though, is if we agree, let's just TA this thing and move on. And I think that's really the point we're trying to make. If these other districts can handle it, then I don't see why Tewksbury administrators can't handle it as well. I think they're all capable of being able to do this. And rather than continue to tie it to other proposals, slowing that proposal down, whether, unintentionally, obviously I'm not saying you're doing it purposely, but let's move forward here, get this one done, checked off, and then move on to the next.
So we know that other districts are doing it. Do you have data that's showing how many substitutes they get per day? Are they able to fill their current substitutes?
My understanding...
That's important for, to understand too, not just that it's successfully working, what logistics are happening, at the ground level for them.
Sure.
That we're just trying to make sure, as we sit really in the middle, right here, to balance, to make sure that, we're giving people the tools that they need and giving, you guys really what you need. So that's all that I think we're looking for.
So, I was tasked over the last few weeks to talk to educators from other districts. And based on what I'm hearing is they find themselves in the same substitute challenges that we do. And that, based on that, can I give you a specific number? No, but I can tell you that we're all facing these challenges, and these districts are able to get the job done with these half-days, just like we could. And I think if we are in such agreement, let's check this one off and move on. But that's just my perspective.
I'd love to. On behalf of the aides, I think we'd be way more apt to step up for a half a day and not have to not give kids services all day, rather than being pulled for an entire day.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's a benefit to us, to the students we service. So, and you're not going to have any more absences. They're going to take either the whole day or the half day.
So we are looking to wrap this one up. I have one question and one comment. Not trying to put you on the spot, Lori. So if you don't want to expand at the moment, you don't have to, but you do come from a district who did have the half-day sick days. Did you see it becoming more of a problem, kind of like Bridget was
I
asking?
agree with what Josh said. The same substitute problems exist.
Regardless.
Yeah. And since you've given me permission to talk, I will add in, if I can, what I'm hearing. I feel like I'm hearing that if we go back to the bereavement conversation, you're concerned, we're saying, on our end, we're saying, we would never, if you lost 2 people in a year, ever, who would do that? Say that you can't do that. But you're saying, can we just get that language cleaned up, because we're not always going to be all the same people who are doing this understanding. So I think on our end, I hear what you're saying. Who are our aides and who are saying no? You know the aides. We won't know the aides forever, and I think that's how we're kind of feeling. And we're saying, who would ask an aide to force an aide to step up who doesn't want to? As a principal, I would never do that. But I'm not always going, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we're saying the same thing, and I think what I'm hearing is this language feels just protective, and assuming trust and positive intentions that no one is looking to put an aide in a situation that they wouldn't want to be in. But we do have to put kids first, and there are times where an administrator has to make the best decision for students in that moment, and it's not always the most popular teacher decision sometimes, but hopefully you always know that it's coming from the right place. And I feel like that's kind of where we are on this. I didn't have a problem with substitutes, but I will tell you, in my building, I could ask anyone for anything. We have a Tewksbury teacher here, I don't know if she's in here, but she would tell you. They would help if I needed it. So, and on the flip side, if I had to, I would also jump in. So I think that's kind of where we are in terms of the language. Randy?
So reflecting on everything we've kind of just thrown in there, I appreciate that you totally understand where we're coming from. My sister also works in a district that has half-day sick days, and I did ask her, I don't have numbers like Josh, but she said she's never had a complaint about it or seen any issues with it. My point is, in elementary especially, there was a few years in the past where we could not get a substitute for a teacher who was out for a whole day. So as a school, and out of respect for each other and our principals, we would take that class and we would absorb it into our classes. And it wasn't ideal, but you're right, those kids need a place to go. We're professionals. We don't love it, but we're going to do it because that's my job, right? So if we can have half days, imagine if we can't get coverage. I'd rather have absorb 5 more kids for a half day than absorb them for the entire day because a teacher has a half-hour appointment. Do you want, and that hasn't happened in a while, so I don't want it to seem like that's a practice that's common, but it's a last resort practice that has happened, and we make it work. But I'd rather do it in a half-day situation than in a whole-day situation.
Yep, so I think our final comment to wrapping the sick day discussion up, half-day sick day, is just, I don't have my own children, but on behalf of those who do. Another thing that could be great is, my daughter is sick. I can't get anyone right away that morning, but I can get my mom after her appointment or whatever to babysit my sick kid for the second half of the day, and then I can go into work. So it gives flexibility for people with children as well.
So we threw a lot there, but a lot of rationale. We feel that this is pretty important to us, so thank you for considering. I think we've all heard each other out quite a bit. Would you like to, we'll play a little tennis?
Sure.
And before we do our last thing.
Because you will beat me. Yeah, so, well, we can pass these out all at the same time, too, I think. Yeah, the updated financial analysis we didn't want the teachers to feel left out, so we have the same sort of document that we had with respect to ESPs coming your way regarding teachers. We also have a counter proposals to the personal day language, counter proposal regarding tuition reimbursement. That's in one document. And then there's our initial set of proposals that was very long because the length of workday proposal touched upon a whole bunch of other stuff. That's what we're calling our modified, what are we calling it again? Modified proposals, which if you see the first set, this is the modified, the whole shebang. But, and I'll go through it. Most of it, I think I bolded where we changed it, but we'll go through it so that you catch all the changes. Did we pass this one out yet?
So we should have a total of 3.
I think we only have one.
We have this, no.
The cost analysis, the counter,
Yep.
and then the that.
So many, I don't know.
I know.
Yep.
See what anybody.
Even with my organized.
Give it to us.
Yeah, I didn't get. I don't have the big document. Is this the one that we changed?
Yeah.
Or is that, okay.
Yeah, it's right up top.
I should probably have my, oh, right, okay. Okay.
Are there 2 or 3?
There should be
There's 3.
3, okay, great.
Well, once everybody gets their copies, we'll make sure everybody has 3 different pieces of paper. Okay. Put that aside.
Yeah.
Where did that, do you need one? No. This came up. Attention. Dave is at question, now we're gonna wait for them to.
I just forgot.
Yeah, no, that's all right. We can take, if we have a minute at the end, we can go through where we're at on all the things flying
I think
around.
we need that one, yeah.
All right.
I think
So-
everybody here.
We don't really have to visit too much the cost analysis. You can just see, probably, you'll see, if you compare it to the prior one, you'll see there's a few numbers that have been adjusted.
Maybe
why don't
does
you-
anybody, I don't know, I mean, I don't know if there's any questions,
On the,
a cost analysis that just shows from our proposal to what the TTA proposed and the difference. This is the summary, this is the cost analysis of the whole proposal, not just the salary piece, the base salary. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
the major items.
The major items, which
Okay.
relates to longevity, relates to FMLA, half sick day, all that stuff, right? The biggest thing obviously being the salary piece.
Can I just ask for my own brain
Yeah.
for the next meeting? Can we line item those out? So like salaries, longevity, because we are talking about, it's not a package, right? Yet, so we're talking about separate items. So we want to know what we're dealing with in terms of that. And I also have my own spreadsheets, so I just want to make sure that my numbers and your numbers match. So that we're not talking about apples and bananas.
Sure.
Is this cost analysis any different than the one you handed out at the end of the meeting on the 15th?
Yeah, the numbers up top might be a little bit different.
Slightly different, Peter. There wasn't much movement.
Oh, Dave, yeah.
Yeah, Dave's-
And also, this is not taking into account our recent counter to the parental leave proposal or the tuition reimbursement. He's there if you need him. Oh, there you are, Dave. But do you want us to talk about why they're different? Because I'll just have Mr. Libby to jump in. If, not now? All right, well, we can do that maybe in a bit if you still want to explore that. If you want to start with the one-page counter document, we can get through that one, I think, rather quickly. I don't have that. This one right here? Oh, you can read along with me. Okay. So let me just orient us to where you were at with your proposal. All right, hold on, I don't have that one. Okay, here we are. So 18, you had proposed a couple of changes to the personal day, or the temporary leaves with pay provision. We are countering on the introductory paragraph, but maintaining our rejection of the changes you have that follow. We're maintaining 3 personal days. We're maintaining the blackout days.
Where?
So you have
one-pager.
a personal day proposal that was your proposal number 18.
Our
On-
one-pager is for reimbursement.
What?
Wait, no,
No, there's
no,
two
that's
separate ones.
Yes,
At the top, it
yes.
says counter proposal to TTA proposal number 18. No, let me explain.
Okay.
I'm saying your proposal had changes proposed to a bunch of different sections of the personal day, the leave, temporary leave. We are counter-proposing language only with respect to the introductory paragraph to Article 22. The rest of Article 22, we are proposing that it just stay as it is. Okay, all right. So with respect to the change to the introductory paragraph, we are accepting the notion of entering requests for personal days and requests for leave via Frontline, but as to any other types of temporary leave with pay, I don't think we're quite there yet with Frontline. And let me just look at the other, I'm just looking at the collective bargaining agreement.
What are we now?
Wait, I'm sorry, what do you mean we're not quite, sorry,
Yes, right.
There's 7 types of.
Yeah, there's 7
temporary
types of temporary leave.
Yeah, so Connor, it's not quite ready for like military leave, jury duty leave. It just can't handle that capacity yet.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I get, okay.
That
Yeah.
stuff
So-
would have
Would you
to
be
go
willing to
through
put the religious thing in
superintendent.
there at least? Because I know Frontline has religious, but some members just reached out with concern of memorializing the contract.
So the committee's not going to set up a separate category called religious leave. Obviously, if someone needs to use a personal day for a religious observance, obviously that's one of the perfectly fine reasons to take a personal day. If someone's out of personal days, but they have a matter that requires absence in order to, observe whatever the the aspects of that religion are, they can certainly request an unpaid day, but the district's not adding a category called religious leave. If you need to take a day for religious purposes, you're going to put in for a personal day.
Oh,
Or you're
Yeah,
going to add an
clarifying
unpaid.
question there. Is that how we do it
I
now?
don't think
I've never
so.
had to take a religious day, but I thought those
I
were
think they're paid.
granted, not made to use a personal day for it.
I've never had a request for one.
I'm
For-
pretty sure they're paid.
So it's a separate,
And they're not deducted.
hold up, one at a
Yeah.
time, one at a
All right.
time, please. One at a time. So tell me what your experience is with, if you guys want to,
So I can
one at
explain
a
this.
time, share with me what your experience has been.
Yeah, so we do have members who, whatever religion, have always applied on Frontline. Frontline has a category for it. It does not deduct from any other leave. They get religious observance. I think there's actually a state law about it, but we were just, in our original proposal, we just said at the top, not even its own category, but all leaves, including religious leave, will be made via Frontline or whatever appropriate, yada, 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 because it's already on there, and we had just been reached out to multiple times by different members to request it's in the contract just so it's there. Not just the rationale, but the practice, I'm pretty sure by state law, is they're paid for a religious observation.
I'm not sure that you're eligible for pay. I know that you have to have an accommodation, a reasonable accommodation for a religious observance absence. but the paid part, I'm not sure about. It sounds to me like that hasn't been an issue in practice here. Is that what folks are?
I just wanted to clarify that we don't, like, I know someone specifically that celebrates Jewish holidays in our district. I don't recollect that she's ever had to use a personal day to observe it. That I wanted to clarify because you stated they could use a personal day.
Was she paid for the absence?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
But had not had to take any deduction off of any paid?
No.
Got you, okay. Thanks for telling me, I was not aware of that, okay. We'll have to talk about that. But let me back up. The counter that we're making was not intended to deprive anyone of what currently exists, right? It just was dealing with the process for asking for the time, you know? But we'll have to caucus about that further. Okay. If there's no further comments, questions? Okay, we'll talk about the tuition reimbursement. This is a counter which seeks to make the $66,000 aggregate total increase to $85,000. And folks that are bachelor's level and, you know, on their way to a master's, they're entitled to a maximum per year, per person, $1,500. And anyone else who's already at master's, they still have the $750 reimbursement amount. So that's our counter on tuition reimbursement.
Any questions for anyone on this side?
I have one. So I understand we've talked a lot about, you know, 1,500 is closer to what like a regular course would cost or something. But let's say you did, I just want to make sure I didn't read it. Let's say you did take a class that was only like $1,000, right? Could you go back for the other 500, or like is that still a?
Good question.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
Okay, because there is a chance that you live, no one wants to leave money on the table in the respect that like, if I could take another class and get a little further.
We'll talk about that. We'll inquire whether we can,
That's fine.
right now, it's really, it's not clear. So we'll discuss it and we'll get back to you.
Per person, per.
Yeah, all right, we'll certainly discuss that. And I think, all right, so that takes care of the easy one. So the next document is, if you see what we originally proposed on January the 23rd, this is an updated version of that with, I hope I've bolded everything that's different. So you'll recall that our initial salary proposal was linked with the 8-hour workday. So we have, in response to your salary proposal, modified our proposal to reduce the 8-hour workday to a 7.5-hour workday. And again, I know there was a lot of conversation around this, but there was, your proposals, shall we say, cried out for more time to prepare, either alone or with one another. And so, as you know, we made a lot of commentary and we discussed at length our attempt at making time in the day to have that happen while you're all in the building together without cutting into instructional time. That is an area that is a deal, it's a non-starter for us to cut into instructional time to make more, you know, prep and common planning. So the solution that we saw, which I know you guys weren't wild about, was to increase your time together in the building. Anyway, so that's the modification of our previous position.
Excellent. Could I just make a point quickly?
Sure.
So I think going off what you said, right, more time to meet with each other, more preparation time, right? There's a two-tier response I want to say. Our original proposal, first of all, was the PLC during either the half or early release day. It wasn't necessarily looking for more PLC. The PLC was going to be that during that time. So we weren't looking for necessarily more PLC. I would actually say at times, you know, we find it pretty adequate. I'll put it like that.
So you wanted to reschedule?
Structure.
Exactly.
Reschedule it?
And the second tier is this, with preparation time, and we said this a few times in the last few negotiations, it's more the inequity of elementary educators versus high school or middle school educators. High school and middle school are not looking for more prep time in any of these proposals. It's just because of the inequity between the prep time. So I just want to clarify that.
I think someone made a very clear point about that on this side of the room.
Okay, we just want to make sure, because I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page.
Someone else wanted to, yeah.
So you're saying, the idea behind this was to give us that preparation time. That's why the extra half hour.
To find some
facilitate
time
that. So
to-
does
yeah.
that mean we won't have duties during these times, those teacher days, so that we can have preparation time?
Well, I think if you read further, it may come clear to you that, well, we have a handout, but only before we go there, because let's focus on this, and then we'll talk about the handout that might answer your questions. The time outside of the work day, the student day, I should say, will consist of, and then you'll see what it's consisting of. And it does include equitable rotation of supervisory duties. And then it includes, it absorbs other provisions that we seek to strike out that talk about extra help and stuff like that. Before I go further, there is an illustration that I'll hopefully will answer your question in large part. We did, well, let's keep going, and I'll talk about the bold provisions that are changed from the prior. So along with that, we're keeping the salary provision the same, but we're requesting 7.5 hours versus 8 hours in connection with that salary proposal. So as you go down on page 2, you'll see that we are resurrecting the 2 evening mid-year parent-teacher conferences out of concern that if we remove that time, we may come up short folding it in with the reduced day, So if we do reduce the day from 8 to 7.5, it gives us, over the course of the year, 90 extra hours to play with, right? If you bring back in the 2 evening conferences, you're now at 86 extra hours to play with. But I think there was a concern, and I don't know if the superintendent wants to go at length about being able to schedule parent-teacher conferences within the 7.5, average of 7.5 hour day.
I think the illustration will show.
Yeah, okay, so we'll get to that.
That it won't work for all parents, and reserving some nighttime for some, there's a choice. And it's, you illustrated or talked, taking that half hour off, that's 90 hours not in there, which provided a whole lot more time for extra prep and parent communications. So I think the illustration will help to see how that time may be parsed out for all of these things.
And then moving on to, this kind of doesn't relate to all that, but in discussing the configuration of PLCs on page 3, I bolded, we removing the note piece of our proposal on the PLCs. I think there was a concern there that someone had about that language being in there, so we just took it out.
Roseanne, can we jump, just because there's a lot of information on that first page and a half.
Yeah.
Can we, because I think that's going to answer a lot of questions.
Yes.
That, before we continue.
I'm just skimming to make sure there's nothing else that deals with that.
Okay.
I
don't think there
I think
is.
it'll get back to the preschool question, and that.
Yeah, right, that'll be shown.
So which topic are we going back to?
We're going to pause here before we go through the rest of the changes we made to our initial proposal, because I think a lot of it's going to center on what does the day look like, with the 7.5, and how much time are we allocating to other, certain categories. And someone did a lovely pie chart, not me, that shows you what it might look like.
I have a super kind of technical question here before we jump into because this isn't going to help this. Dewey and Heathbrook is listed that the student's day goes to 3:20. and the teacher's day goes to 3:15, so maybe just help us understand which of those is.
It's also starting at 7:45, which is not accurate, so that's the problem.
Right, I didn't know which end it was.
So if you look up top, it says May, because there's a lot of cross-outs here, and we knew there could be some flexibility to work with teachers at the building level on what that end, start and end time might be.
Right, but I'm looking at the other ones, they seem to be like, they reflect that.
It's an error then. It's a typo.
Okay, so I guess just whenever you have the chance, I just don't know which part of it would be adjusted.
Well, it's funny because that's the example you're going to actually see is K through 4.
With the times?
I think so.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we just handed out the teacher workday is kind of broken down, so a lot of charts. Dave's going to get it up for us in just a second, but it's probably, if I'm you, I probably want to find my school and look at that pie chart, so they're all titled. The first one is TMHS, and I'll just start with that one just to walk you through. I'm not going to walk you through all of these, we would be here all night, but just to help the understanding. So basically, if you're looking at the pie chart, you can see that we have the 4 hours and 2 instructional minutes carved out. Then there's the average teacher prep time, your lunch time. This is in the current 7-hour day, by the way. The before and after minute. And then in the high school, we have the luxury of having the passing time in there as well. And then that's just broken out on the side for you. Below that pie chart, the second chart shows the counter 7.5 day and what that could look like. This is under the premise we are thinking about. We know teachers need more time. We know you need more collaboration time. So we did not, as Roseanne explained, we are preserving, obviously, instructional time. But we did take that 40-minute before and after student time in yellow and made it 70 minutes. So that's the chart. On the side, you can see that there's the instructional minutes, the average teacher prep time, you've got the common planning time, the lunch minutes, before and after minutes. That's the same. The before and after minutes is the same no matter where you work, no matter what school you're in. The other things we know vary from school to school. So, Dave, if you can go down to, and I know you're all examining your own pie charts, but if you can go down to, what does this time include? Thank you. So good. In this, in this time, the yellow time, right, that 70 minutes would include the one PLC, the extra help, enrichment support, parent meetings, any two-way communications. And when we were talking about the potential parent, conference nights, you would have that time. Some of that would, you've got that obligation of the 2 times a year, whatever you could get done in here. And then we would have the other option as it stands if you needed that time. Additional prep in CPT, that time to consult with your team and colleagues. Faculty meeting is built into this, and then the question about the supervisory times, duties, is also built into this. Again, that varies. So on the next slide, what we did is kind of created a side-by-side so you could see the current and the new proposal, the 7-hour day and the 7.5-hour day. I think what's important to point out is currently, if you put in everything that you're currently doing in your 7-hour day, that averages to 7 hours, 14.5 minutes per day. With the 7.5-hour day, it is a 7.5-hour day with all of those things built in, except now you have some more prep and common planning time. But in there is the faculty meetings, in there is the extra help, enrichment, the consult, the PLC, the supervisory, all that is built in. So you always, one of the I think the perks is you kind of know if your day ends at 3:30, your day always ends at 3:30. You're not staying late for faculty meeting. You're not, that sort of thing. And then we did a quick little example and I think this is what Superintendent was alluding to, Emily, to your question. This is how it could look at an elementary school level. So you would have your 60 minutes of PLC time, that 60 minutes of parent communication time. This is across, this is a weekly example. You would have an 80 minutes of extra prep, common planning, consult, and then the 75 minutes across the week for supervisory, 15 minutes times 5 times a day. And I think I'm correct in saying it's not always going to be both, 5 days or both, right? You're not going to have an AM and a PM. That would be
This is like the most case scenario.
right. This would be the most case scenario.
Are those duties? Is this what you're?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or being in the room.
Or like, there are other examples at other schools where, but for you guys, yeah, it would be duties. But like kids coming in after, they've got their breakfast and they're coming into the classroom and maybe you're in the classroom, that sort of thing. And then we just showed, say, the example of center, if you had that 15 minutes before, 55 minutes after, or Heathbrook and Dewing, maybe you're doing 55 minutes before and 15 minutes after. School starts a little bit later, so you have time for that. We also talked a lot about leaving. This is not something that we're looking to prescribe for you, but something that would be, we talked about scheduling committees and in collaboration with the building principal. We know that each building has its own culture, but those are the things that would be included. And then we just outlined some of the benefits for you, in case you weren't thinking of them already. All the teachers are on the same schedule. Your before and after school times are all the same, so everybody's available when we're talking about consult and being able to common plan. In terms of supporting students for extra help and enrichment, at some of the schools, it's definitely helpful to have a consistent time for that, so we're kind of breaking down barriers for kids to be able to access help. You've got some communication time in there, supervision, again, during some of those unstructured times, and we also wanted you to know that each building will collaborate to schedule this time as appropriate for the grade levels.
Okay.
I have a super simple question.
Go ahead.
Just to be very explicit.
Yeah.
Having a 7.5-hour day every day takes away the extra hour that we do right now.
Correct.
In this proposal.
Right.
Okay.
And the faculty.
Built in, and the faculty meeting would be built in. Everything is built in.
Except for
the
those
parent-teacher
the night
conferences.
meetings.
And so what was, and we know, we realize, it's fair to say, I think, that we know elementary, there's still some stuff going on there, right? We know that. So, but this is one stab at. So what's shocking to me is you're really averaging an extra 15 minutes a day.
Currently.
In the 7.5-hour day.
The 7-hour day. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
In the 7-hour, you're already doing 7 hours and 14.5 minutes on average every day when you add in all of the other things that are outside and not really accounted for.
Okay, I'm going to kind of speak on this whole thing, and then I know Josh wants to speak and Peter would like to speak too. We're obviously going to entertain this proposal, of course, right, and this counter, and we appreciate you all hearing us and, making this counter, so genuinely thank you. I think, if I'm being honest, the resounding thing I got is it's really hard for our members to digest right now that in a time when education's at a crisis, in a time when, a lot of other districts are giving cost of living adjustments that are pretty gracious, ours is being tied to more time being made to be in the school. And I understand there's a lot of things being folded in. I get what you're saying here, but the fact of the matter is a substantial amount more time expected to be here is being folded in to earn this cost of living, but that's not really a cost of living, that's just paying the time for more labor. And, I understand the total intent here, I really do. This is gonna be hard for members to really, they're going to struggle with this. And once again, I thank you all genuinely for hearing us out, but there is not really I know we did our research, I know there's one other local that has the hour beyond in, Eastern Massachusetts. We looked at the scope, maybe not the whole scope, and I know there might be one or two other locals that maybe have a little bit extra, but in recent times, this ask hasn't been expected of other districts. So members are they're noting that.
You asked regarding the length of the workday, you mean?
Say again?
The ask regarding the length of the workday?
Extended,
yes.
Yes.
Extended.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And I just wanted to be very forthcoming and transparent with you all. We're going to obviously entertain it, we're going to talk with members, but I just needed to get that off my chest because I think I'm speaking for a lot of our members.
Yeah, and I would think that you will come back with perhaps a response in terms of adjusting your initial proposal, and we will entertain that, and we will look at what we have on the table and see if we have an adjustment. That's, how it's going to go.
Yeah, yes, just real quick, with because I was the one that spoke up about the elementary prep time. I've been pretty invested in it, in the deficit and all that. You say you don't want to take away from time on learning, and I completely understand that. Is it on the state's side that you don't want to take away because you're afraid we won't, get where we need to be? Is it curriculum-wise you don't want to take away? I guess I just want clarification on that.
Yeah.
So we can throw out some ideas on how we as teachers can better educate them if we did have to get rid of some time on learning?
Where are we at with the elementaries now? What number are we at with the elementaries now?
I think it's important if you look at yours, so we agree, the time elementary teachers spend with children is longer. You can see it in the instructional time, but every one of those minutes is valuable. And it isn't all, we all know it's not every kid at a desk the whole time because that is not appropriate. There's transition built in. There's definitely that. However, I would say, look again at your prep. It's not the prep right now where you're behind. It's the common planning. Right now, elementary teachers have 66 minutes, based on the contract, a day, average. It's the common, and that's what we recognize too, is you need that time. And whether it plays out as prep or common, we leave that choice in this scenario that was just an example. So we're very protective of all instructional minutes for students. If you look at them, we're only 4 hours, at the high school, and a little over that at the elementary. So yes, time on learning matters, but that instructional time is highly protected, for every student. But if you look at the prep again, I know we did some work last time. So when you add up your 45 a day, 1 times 45 a week, add that 9 minutes to the 45, and 3 times 20, right? That's 60. So there's another 12. That's how we came to the 66. Elementary teachers get 66 minutes of prep average per day. Okay.
I'm
so
sorry.
I didn't know if you had saw that in there, but it's clearly when you only have 2 times 20 in common, there's where we know you don't have the same level of common planning or common prep even as a grade level.
Hi, based on what you just said, I have a clarifying question I was asking my elementary colleagues near me. On the pie chart that you gave, underneath individual teacher prep average, the 45 a day, which is us, the specialists, the 45 a week.
Yeah.
The plus 60 a week, where you just broke it down 2 times or 3 times 20. What time is that?
There's 5 times 20, 3 of which are individual prep, and 2 of which are common. If you read the language, it's
the lunchtime
called
prep.
Are you
common
talking about
and
the
individual
lunch?
prep. Those who have been
lunch.
here a while. No, the 20 after lunch.
Recess?
Tied to
Yeah.
our lunch.
And.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
20 minutes after lunch.
I did, thank you for doing the pie charts. This was informative. I'm glad you did recognize the common planning time
Yeah,
deficit.
we do, we see it.
It's 8 minutes.
Well, it's 40 over the week, but when you divide that by 5,
Correct.
it looks silly at 8.
But 8 minutes a day
it's silly.
versus I'm looking at the other
Yeah.
buildings at 50
Right.
a day.
50 common planning?
You know, I just feel like saying it says a lot. I'm glad you acknowledge, I appreciate the stab.
Okay.
I'm just reflecting on what we said earlier about ESPs and that we might be able to work something out where maybe sometime during my day, which would probably be during CBD, I would have to somehow leave messages, and I'm thinking that's 8 minutes a day. And now I'm going to leave messages for people.
Yeah.
Because I can't meet with them. I know we're working on it, so I'm not trying to grumble, but it is a very strong reality that I am quaking in my boots, because I'm looking at this and I say, this is still 74 minutes versus 100 for every one of my grade 5 through 12 colleagues.
Yeah,
So-
and just to come back to that for a second, so on the example that was in the presentation, the last, not the last page, but the right before the benefits slide, the 80 minutes K through 4 a week, so roughly, again, by day, 16 minutes essentially gets added to that 8 a day today. So roughly, you're looking at about 24 minutes a day. I know it goes a lot by minutes, and it seems crazy to maybe some folks out there listening, but again, it's a step in the right direction, right? I recognize that that's,
Yes.
it's not going to necessarily solve it all, but it's taking steps to chipping away at it.
Yes, and like I
without
said, I
taking-
don't want to sound, I appreciate the steps. I would just, for transparency, I'm still concerned.
And I think, again, that's just was an example, knowing, and I see how you do your supervisory time in the morning and the afternoon. If you don't have both, that's, and most don't, well, that's time for the teacher as well. It depends on the school, and there are nuances at every school that are a little different.
Right.
And you know, we're trying to look at that in a way of what would those 350 minutes look like, and then how would that be worked out? If the only requirements are that PLC and notice with K4, there's less extra help than there is at 512, meaning, but there's more opportunity to use that for both parent communication and extra help. So we looked at that a little different for you as well.
Okay.
The principals were really creative, too, in thinking this through, and they would be with the associated staff.
So I just wanted to bring up a couple of concerns that I saw. Like when I'm looking at the proposed contract change language change, you know, it brings up, you know, additional time being used for prep time. I think it was brought up in the packet as, what does this time include? Additional prep and CPT. But then I'm doing the math, right? And perhaps my math is a little off, and you can correct me if I am, but it's about 2.5 hours of additional time per week. Right? And then in the contract, proposed contract language, it says 1 hour of PLC, 1 hour of extra help, 15 minutes of duty. So that leaves 15 minutes, according to the proposed language, for parent communication and prep. So I think my concern here is that it's being offered to us as, look at this extra time that we're willing to give you, but then you're going to mandate how that time is used pretty much every single day. And this kind of comes back to one of our main arguments that we've been making, is we feel that we need more autonomy. And every time we ask for that, you return with a proposal that gives us less of it. At least that's how I'm feeling, all right? The second thing I want to bring up is that, you know, to Lori's point about the fact that we already do those additional 15 minutes, right? And I completely understand that. But by doing it this way, teachers have less flexibility to get what they need done when they can get it done. So by staying an additional half hour per day, that's going to put childcare stress on parents. That's going to put medical care stress on teachers. All of these different ways that are going to, a slight change could have huge effects for our members' ability to conduct their daily lives. And I also want to just say this last point, you know, and Brenda brought up the additional, you know, prep time that elementary teachers have, and apart from the fact that, you know, we can look at those numbers and sure, I think 66 minutes was a day on average, somewhere around there. These elementary school teachers are prepping for 5 to 7 lessons a day, different lessons. And the fact that they only have 15 minutes more than I do, who's planning for one major one with some modifications depending on the class, obviously, is problematic. So I do want the school committee to recognize the fact that time on learning is only as good as the time teachers are able to prep for that learning. So if we could please reconsider this, I don't know, this lack of time for elementary and in this proposal, I think members would be pretty happy. Thank you.
If I could just speak to the spirit of that, and actually, administration might speak to this better, but I was in the room for the conversation, so I'd like to just at least say, with that language of time will be scheduled for, and then it lists all those things, it specifically didn't follow how the contract has been in the past, which is 1 hour per week of this, 60 minutes for whatever. This basically listed all of these things, basically giving you the autonomy of how you want to manage those things. So I think there was, a strong spirit of how can we just list the things that time would include, but not dictate to you how it was done. At least that's how I interpreted it as we wrote it.
But based on looking at it, right, you give us an extra 2.5 hours, but you do determine how much of that time is used per thing, right? Right.
Can I just interject? You already are doing an extra hour out of the day, plus the 7.5 for a faculty meeting. That would not happen anymore. That extra time's already there. Now, so I don't know if we didn't explain that well, but that's time you wouldn't be doing. So it's in the 70 instead of the 40 plus those extra hours every week.
All right.
I think we probably need to move on.
Yeah.
It's getting late.
It is getting late.
Yeah. We have one more point.
Yeah.
Is that one?
Okay, so I had something off of Josh, what Josh said, but then also for Rich. So I understand Rich and Bridget's point about this doesn't exactly lay out, right, exactly what you're supposed to use the time for. However, neither does really the PLC language right now, and yet that's dictated to us more often than not. I think a big piece of the opposition that we're going to run into that you're going to run into for this is that it kind of lays out that there is a lack of understanding of what our day looks like. Next week alone, I have 3 hours of parent meetings during the school day. My prep blocks all last week were taken up running around trying to consult with people because we don't have programming in our buildings to actually help our students. So instead we have to take our time to run around and do those things and catch up. Add that on to me desperately trying to meet up with my ESP to talk about what I need to do. When we start laying out all these things, this time's going to be, we're going to be told what to do with a lot of this. I understand in a good faith effort, I understand that you probably really do, no, we're giving you all of these options. I understand that. We're telling you from the way the contract plays out right now, that's not how it will play. It might be how it plays out for 6 months or a year or something, but it won't look like that. And this just kind of emphasizes how much our day isn't understood and how much our minute-by-minute planning and shifting and pivoting isn't understood. Because I would actually have enough time in my day. Elementary is different, obviously they have a deficit. I would have enough time in my day to get done most of what I needed to if I wasn't doing all the things tacked onto it because of the lack of programming, the mandates, the initiatives, the prep work for things that aren't my job. I would have a much better handle on managing things. So I just want to say, I think that is going to be a rightfully major hurdle here.
So Emily, your solution then is to cut into instructional time. I just want to make sure that is that what you're suggesting?
Can I just ask a question on the instructional time?
Yeah.
Because I'm new here. I get that. I'm just looking at these proposals and kind of doing some math. But even with the TTA's proposal of 2 half-days per month, so we're adding on 20 half-days, you're still 33 hours under, over the minimum amount of hours that are needed for the school year.
Are you looking at all the
We're not we're not cutting into instructional time in a way that would put us out of compliance with the state. We're reallocating some of that time so that teachers can better prepare for when they are in front of students to have more meaningful instruction. That's, I think, what I'm getting on day one of me being here.
So we're talking about also, I think Josh mentioned, things for, teachers, whether it's medical care, for the extra half hour, some daycare struggles. I'm also concerned about those for our families as well, with 20 extra half days of school year, if I'm being completely honest. Plus another 8 for PLC time, that was in a different proposal, plus another 1 for the day before Christmas. So
There's also a half-day.
39 half days of school year is not the solution here.
So I think
It's
that
not.
this particular topic is kind of what we wanted to go into
We are going to talk about this next time.
further tonight.
Sure.
Tina, you need to know that what's being proposed by the teachers is,
Hold on. Ms. Niles was in the middle of a conversation.
I thought she was finished.
In responding to Mr. Russo.
sorry, I thought you were finished.
So we want to jump into this more because we hear that concern and we do have information and data and things like that for you that show other districts and whatnot that have a half day every single week. And that's not what we're asking for. So
How else would you propose we do 39 half days? That's 1 a week.
I'm sorry?
How else would you propose? 39 weeks of school year with 39 half days is on average 1 a week.
No, I think.
I understand
What I
that.
was trying to do was give you more information about the number of half-days that are being proposed. There's a half-day the day before the December holiday. There's a half-day per month for PLC time, and there's another 2 half-days per month
For elementary level only.
at elementary.
So
That's all.
I understand your point, but to the point you've been making all night, that's our initial proposal. But when the counter came in, it wasn't, okay, we think 39's a lot, but how about we do, I'm just gonna, 20, 15, whatever. Instead, we got, how about an extra hour a day? So I think that part of it is. For universally. So I think part of this is they don't feel even in the same realm because they're starting on opposite, very different perspectives of the situation. Back to my point of, I don't think our day and what goes on and what we already spend all this time doing is well understood. Maybe that's something that we have to and we should plan on better explaining, and that would be a good use of time. And maybe, to the counterpoint, looking at, 39 you feel is too many. So what is a day, given that we're over numbers, given that plenty of other districts have regular half-days built in and their parents find systems or there's programs in the town, whatnot. This is just so far on the other end of that, and it feels like it's not really countering our initial proposal.
I agree that we have to get going, but to that point about how far over beyond it seems to be, I'm looking at 9 communities that I researched that are local. Of those 9 communities, only 1 requires work time more than 7 hours and 10 minutes. And that 1 community that does pays 13% on average more in salary than the town of Tewksbury. 5 communities have 7 hours or less of required time in their contracts. And the community with 6 hours and 36 minutes pays on average $11,000 more per teacher, and that's a neighboring community. And I think what's not accounted for in the proposal is the value of our own time when our workday ends. Because while we might be attending meetings that we are already attending, we are also not attending the extra time that you're proposing. And that time is massively valuable for all of the reasons that Josh stated, but in the global perspective, the autonomy of the employer. You trust us enough to teach the children in the town, but yet, in an additional time that you're proposing, you're leaving 15 minutes for us to get how we use prep time. Like it's really, when you look at neighboring communities, it's really beyond.
Okay, it is
Can I get-
7:50.
can you-
Yeah.
I was
go
just
ahead.
hoping you would share that data with us on the communities.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that because
Please.
I've looked at that data too and have a different scenario, so we can perhaps
got it.
compare some notes. Thank you.
So as we can see, this is like obviously a nerve that's being struck on both sides. And we will talk about this more when it's not 7:50 because I am falling asleep. So,
So we're.
Any final thoughts,
Yeah, we're on for March 19th.
March
March
19th.
19th is our
March
next,
19th, we're
yeah.
on for April 2nd, and I think we have April 23rd.
23rd.
But starting at 5 PM that night.
On the 23rd.
I just want to make sure that we're all on the same.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
March 19th, April 2nd.
All right.
And March, and motion to adjourn, April 23rd.
Okay, we adjourn at 7:51.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.